Chapter 3977. Perhaps, no matter how much he did, in the end, he would still get nothing. Just like him, he had thought that if he tried a little harder, he would be able to pick up the past with her. However, reality proved that there were many things that you missed at the time. Perhaps you would miss them forever. Yunfei silently stared at the ice crystal coffin, tears falling silently. Big brother. Yun Piaomiao turned to look at him, reached out her hand, and gently patted his shoulder. Are you really not going to wait for Jojo? Jojo is a child who values relationships and righteousness. If you don't let her know about this, I'm afraid that she will blame you in the future. Yunfei frowned slightly and said softly, why do you have to make her sad again? If he could save Ah-sun that day, the master and disciple would be able to reunite happily. But now, since he didn't manage to save her, why bother telling her about it? Your master originally had a chance to live, but now there's no hope at all. Isn't this making that child sad again for no reason? It's enough for him to experience the feeling of heartbreak alone. Yunfei closed his eyes and sighed softly. There's no need to wait any longer, let's bury her. The few of them lifted the crystal coffin and placed it into the large wooden coffin at the side. After placing some burial objects inside, the few men who were working turned to look in Yunfei's direction. Seeing him nod with a heavy expression, they closed the coffin. Whoosh! A shovel of soil fell down. Master Wu Yan immediately chanted in a deep voice, return to your life, Paradise Amitabha. May your pure light shine on me. Rustle, 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 the falling soil covered it. The benevolent oath took me, I am mindful today. Call Tathagata's name, Bodhi path seek the pure land, Buddha's original oath. If there are living beings who wish to give birth to my country, the light from the talisman array dimmed, and the guards guarding Wind Thunder City couldn't help but blink, looking at the man and woman who suddenly appeared at the city gate with a stunned expression. The two of them raised the Royal Academy's identity token at the same time, and the guards immediately bowed and retreated to the side. Although they were curious, they didn't know where the two of them teleported from, and the guards wouldn't ask. His gaze followed the backs of the two as they entered the city. Arbor and Mo Lien held hands and ran towards the misty peak. She didn't run far before she heard a surprised cry. Qiao Qiao! Prince Mo! Arbor and Mo Lien both turned around and saw Qi Xianxian and little Fatty standing at the side of the crowd, waving happily at them. You're back so soon. Have you settled everything at home? By the way, Brother Mu has returned to the capital. Did you meet him? Arbor shook his head slightly. Mu Xingchen should have returned to the Mu residence directly. After she came out of seclusion, she went to the palace and then left the city. Naturally, she didn't see him. Jojo, the finals have been postponed to the end of the month. Don't be so impatient. No. Arbor shook his head again. I didn't come back for the competition this time. It was the dean who released the dawn bird and told me to come back. Principal. Qi Xianxian was stunned. Did something happen in the academy? Nothing. Little Fatty and Qi Xianxian said in unison, and then looked at each other. But speaking of which, the dean has been acting strangely these few days. I heard that he often brings people to the mountain behind the academy. Oh, by the way, the dean also invited an alchemy grandmaster from the Medicine King Island. That alchemy grandmaster's temper is all right, but his disciple, is really. Chapter 3978. Where are the dean and the rest now? They should be at the back of the mountain. Little Fatty scratched his head. These few days, the dean has sent people to guard the entrance of the back of the mountain. No one is allowed to go up the mountain. Arbor's eyelids twitched. He didn't have time to talk to them. He pulled Mo Lien's hand and ran towards the back of the mountain. Qi Xianxian was stunned. She quickly pulled little Fatty and followed them, shouting, Jojo, Jojo. Where are you going? Seeing that she was anxious, Mo Lien was just about to pick her up and speed up when he suddenly saw her body flicker, and she suddenly appeared at a place 5 kilometers away. Mo Lien was stunned. Then, her eyes lit up. She increased her speed and appeared beside her. The two of them disappeared from Little Fatty and Qi Xuanxuan's sight in the blink of an eye. Qi Xianxian opened her small mouth and cried out, "Follow me." God, even Jojo's speed couldn't keep up. The two of them appeared at the entrance of the back of the mountain in just a few minutes. They saw the two disciples guarding the mountain path stop them. They were shaking their heads and saying something. Arbor's figure flashed and appeared in front of them. He was so fast that the other two students were dazzled. Crown Princess. The two students guarding the mountain were Zhang Mingqiu and Lu Pinwen. They were two of the 4 students who hitched a ride on the Ox Head Mountain. When the two of them saw Arbor appear at the entrance of the mountain path, they were stunned. Then, they smiled. "Crown Princess, Crown Prince, you're back at the school." Arbor nodded slightly and glanced at the two people who were stopped by them. Then, he saw that the two people were looking back at them. One of them was an old man with white hair and a white beard. He looked kind and his eyes were very gentle. The other person was a girl around 18 or 19 years old. She looked proud and solemn. Arbor didn't say much to them. He just pointed up the mountain path. Lu Pinwen immediately put on a troubled expression and scratched his head. "It's not that we don't want the two of you to go, but the dean's elder brother gave the order this morning that no one is allowed to go up the mountain." Arbor raised his eyebrows slightly. "Big Brother Dean. Which saint was this? Why won't you let us go up the mountain?" The red-clothed girl couldn't help but rebuke angrily. "Do you think we want to go up the mountain? If it wasn't for my master suddenly thinking of a way to remedy the situation, why would we need to go up the mountain and talk things out with them?" Arbor looked back at them in confusion. "And you are? Who are you?" The girl raised her chin proudly and looked askance at her. "You're also a student of the royal school. Crown Princess, this is Sir Hewen, whom Dean Yun invited from Medicine King Island. That's Hewen's disciple, Ni Hanji." Lu Pinwen hurriedly said. Arbor looked up and down at Sir Hewen. "The dean invited the two of you to refine pills?" Sir Hewen nodded kindly and said amiably, "That's right." "Refine what pills?" Ni Hanji's expression changed. She put her hands on her hips and said angrily, "I asked you who you were just now, but you didn't answer. Don't you think it's rude to ask a few questions in a row?" Lu Pinwen couldn't help but roll his eyes. This young lady Ni was acting up again. Why did she have to show off in front of the little crown princess for no reason? She had to be careful not to be beaten to a pulp. However, the people in the school had enough of her. Chapter 3979. Just let her try her luck in front of the little crown princess. Otherwise, this woman would always think that she was the most capable person in the world. Arbor glanced at her and stared at the index finger she was pointing at him. Suddenly, he reached out and grabbed it. He pulled it back forcefully, and there was a crack sound. His Excellency Hewen was dumbfounded. Ni Hanji's shriek instantly pierced through the clear sky. Lu Pinwen and Zhang Mingqiu looked at each other and felt an inexplicable sense of satisfaction. "Ha, she indeed turned into dregs in minutes, don't point your finger at me," Arbor said coldly, and then pushed her forcefully with a look of disdain. Ni Hanji staggered back a few steps and was supported by His Excellency Hewen with a pale face. Hewen looked at his beloved disciple with a pained expression and said repeatedly, "Hanji, Hanji, come, give me the medicine first." The bottle of ointment that Hewen had just taken out was snatched away by Arbor in the blink of an eye. Ni Hanji raised her head and glared at Arbor hatefully. She said each word coldly, "You're very good." Arbor looked at her disapprovingly and tossed the ointment in his hand. "If you're not capable enough, then lower your head and be a good person. Don't be arrogant everywhere. In this world, no one has the obligation to spoil you." If it weren't for the fact that Ni Hanji's expression was really ugly, to be honest, Zhang Mingqiu and Lu Pinwen really wanted to give the little crown princess a good round of applause. Wasn't that right? This Ni Hanji had been picky about everything the moment she came to the royal school. She looked down on everything. She didn't live well and didn't eat well. She felt like a fucking immortal had descended. Her ability was just a fart, but she talked a lot of nonsense. It should be left to a swift and decisive person like the little crown princess to discipline this unruly woman. What did she want to see that she didn't like? Great, now she had kicked an iron plate. She was the one who deserved it. Arbor snorted coldly and threw the ointment back into He Wen's hand. He pulled Mo Lien and turned to go up the mountain. Zhang Mingqiu pretended to stop her with a troubled expression and said pitifully, "Crown Princess, what if the dean blames us?" Mo Lien smiled faintly as he looked at his two fellow students, saying nonchalantly, "You can choose. Turn a blind eye and let us go up the mountain. Or we can beat you unconscious before we go up the mountain." Lu Pinwen and Zhang Qiuming looked at each other and twitched their lips at the same time. They subconsciously took 2 steps back. Good people don't fight with evil people. Can't they just give in? Xiao Mu turned her body sideways and sprinted past the 2 people. Mo Lien immediately followed after her. With this delay, Qi Xianxian and Little Fatty had caught up. Blinking her eyes, Qi Xianxian glanced at Ni Hanji, who was groaning softly while holding her hand. She looked at her curiously. Ni Hanji's finger bones were broken, and her fingers were connected to her heart. She was in so much pain that she shed tears. Seeing Qi Xianxian looking at her curiously, she couldn't help but shout, "What are you looking at?" Qi Xianxian pursed her lips and ran over with Little Fatty. Zhang Mingqiu couldn't help but shout, "Hey, classmate, classmate, you can't go up." Qi Xianxian waved her hand and said, "Anyway, letting 1 or 4 people go is the same. You're all going to be unlucky." Zhang Mingqiu blinked. "That makes sense. Master." Ni Hanji was so angry that she pulled He Wen's hand. "The royal school treats its guests so well. I want to go up and ask that Principal Yun how he teaches his students." Chapter 3980. His Excellency He Wen couldn't help but sigh. With his disciple's temper, she would probably only be fine on Medicine King Island with his protection. If she went out alone, who knew how many hidden losses she would suffer? Ni Hanji helped His Excellency He Wen up, leaving Zhang Mingqiu and Lu Pinwen looking at each other again, speechless. Putting 1 was the same as putting 6. It was the same as putting 1. After Arbor mobilized the spatial power in her body, her speed was equal to Prince Mo's. The 2 of them reached the top of the back mountain in a flash. They saw a pine forest rustling in front of them. A low and steady voice drifted into their ears along with the wind. In a moment of thought, a paradise is born. When flowers bloom and see Buddha, they hear Buddha's teachings. Buddha's wisdom is enlightened, and all living beings are enlightened. The deathly white paper money on the ground floated into the air and gently swirled in the wind. Arbor felt her heart tighten for some reason, and she bit her lip subconsciously. Unknowingly, the sound of her footsteps became slightly lower. Stepping on the pine needles, her long white robe slid across the ground, the light gauze fluttering, and the sleeves of her robe fluttered. Her gaze fell on the front, and the grave pit had been covered by a large amount of sand. The sand on the ground slowly fell to the ground with the shovel of the shovel. Apart from Yun Piaomiao, Arbor actually saw Yun Fiang and several teachers from the top academy. What were they standing there for? Who were they burying? Arbor immediately felt her mind in a mess, and it was noisy. Her gaze only stared at the grave pit with sand swirling in the air for a long time. For a moment, she felt as if her throat was blocked by something, and it was so dry that she couldn't even make a sound. Yun Piaomiao, Yun Fiang, and the others turned their heads one after another, and when they saw her, they were slightly stunned. Arbor suddenly quickened her pace and rushed in front of Yun Piaomiao and Yun Fiang. Who are you burying? Why aren't you talking? Who are you burying? Who are you burying? The little girl stared straight at the two with red eyes, her gaze sharp and fierce. Talk! Talk! She shouted at the top of her lungs. Jojo! Mo Lien quickly chased after her and reached out to pull her into his arms. He stroked her head to comfort her. Jojo, don't be so agitated. How could he not be excited? In this inexplicable moment, the intense telepathy made her realize something. The person buried inside, perhaps it was very important to her, very important. Yun Fiang turned to look at Yun Piaomiao and frowned slightly, as if blaming him for bringing the child here. Yun Piaomiao lowered her eyes and said calmly, although it's painful to accept the truth, I think that Peak Master Murong would be gratified to have Jojo send her on her last journey. What are you talking about? Very inexplicably, Xiao Mu actually felt that she was unable to control her emotions at this moment. She allowed the tears to rush out of her eyes and crash down one by one without any warning. She simply could not hold them back. He couldn't stop himself. Her vision was blurry and her body was on the verge of collapsing. What nonsense are you talking about? What do you mean by knowing in the underworld? Where is Murong Sun? She's only missing. She's not dead. Yun Piaomiao and Yun Fiang's gazes landed on her, and they didn't say anything for a long time. She's not dead. Arbor said resolutely. Your master has already been laid to rest, Yun Fiang said softly. This is the truth. Don't run away anymore. Chapter 3981. That's why I can't even see her one last time. You all want to deprive me of that. Tears streamed down her cheeks and rolled down her cheeks. Arbor choked with sobs and questioned word by word, based on what? Based on what? You won't even let me see her one last time. Based on what? I can't see anyone while I'm alive. You can't see her corpse even if you're dead. Based on what can you treat me like this? Jojo. Mo Lien couldn't help but hug her with heartache when she saw her face scrunched up in pain. She looked at the Yun brothers accusingly. Open the coffin. Yun Fiang wearily closed his eyes. Ah Sun has already been laid to rest. Open the coffin. If you won't open it, I'll do it. Mo Lien flicked her sleeve and sent the workers filling in the soil flying. A gust of wind from her palms swept over and pushed the pile of soil out of the grave. Yun Fiang sighed and faintly said, So what if I see her? Great Master Wu Yen also sighed and softly said, Silly child. Qi Xian, the little fatty, Sir He Wen, Ni Hanji, and the others had just run over when they saw a shocking scene in front of them. They saw a large lacquered wooden coffin being sucked out of the grave and landing heavily on the ground. The coffin lid flew up with a whoosh and landed on the ground with a bang. Arbor dashed forward and saw a crystal coffin floating in the air. Mo Lien gently waved her hand and it slowly landed in front of her. Separated by the crystal coffin, this was Arbor's second time seeing Murong Sun in 4 years. She wore a purple robe and had gentle features. A faint, serene smile hung on her beautiful face. She looked like she was in a deep sleep. Her eyes were gently closed and her radiance was restrained. The only thing that remained was the faint traces left behind by time. Murong Sun Arbor crawled forward and laid on top of her crystal coffin. His small hand gently caressed the icy cold white crystal as he murmured, "Murong-sun, you big liar." She gently pushed open the crystal coffin lid and reached out to touch her bone-chilling cheek. Large droplets of tears splashed onto Murong-sun's forehead. "Murong-sun," Arbor quietly murmured, "we've settled down at Rosy Cloud's peak. Second Martial Uncle is here too. Everyone is here. If we rebuild the Holy Water Sect, we definitely won't disappoint the old sect master's hopes. As long as I live, the Holy Water Sect will definitely be well. With this disciple here, the Holy Water Sect will definitely exist for all eternity and flourish." "Master," Arbor murmured. "Don't you regret it? Don't you feel that your life is lacking if you can't personally witness the Holy Water Sect's resurgence?" "Master, Master," the little girl called out in a trembling voice, "Master, Master, Master. Jojo is here. Master, Master. Can you open your eyes and take a look at Jojo? Master, Master, Master." Arbor's arms tightened and tightly hugged Murong-sun. Qi Xian couldn't resist using her sleeve to wipe her tears. This was the first time she saw Jojo crying like a tearful person. He choked on his sobs and couldn't speak. She had always thought that Sir Jojo was a little person made of iron. However, in reality, there was a fragile existence in this little fellow's heart. Mo Lien crouched next to her and gently stroked the little girl's head. She softly said, "Jojo, Master has already left. Let's bury her." Chapter 3982. Arbor shook her head in refusal and refused to let go of Murong-sun's hand. She turned to look at Mo Lien with tears in her eyes. She dazedly said, "Lien, Murong-sun is dead." Mo Lien nodded and grasped her icy hand. "Let's let her rest in peace, okay?" Arbor shook her head and stubbornly said, "She lied to me." Mo Lien's heart wrenched as she looked at her tear-streaked face. She reached out to touch her tear-stained face. "She's a liar." Arbor nodded. "She is a liar. She said she would always be by my side. She said that when I became successful in the future, I would protect her and let her do whatever she wanted no matter where she went. She's a liar. And she said she never lied to me." Mo Lien sighed and wiped away the glistening tears on her cheeks. "Jojo." Arbor hugged Murong-sun and sat there without moving. She sniffled and hugged Murong-sun's head, softly murmuring, "Master, I'll take you back to Holy Water Sect, okay?" "Jojo." Yunfei sighed. "Ah-sun has already left. Let her leave in peace." Arbor suddenly looked up and stared at him. The 1,000-year phoenix wood that Yun Piaomiao was looking for was to refine the soul-returning pill for Master. Yunfei nodded. "After the battle at Holy Water Sect, when I rushed to Holy Water Peak, your master was already at her last gasp. Not long after she returned, Yunfei cast his eyes down. So I sealed her in an ice coffin and temporarily stabilized her soul. I did everything I could to refine the soul-returning pill to prolong her life." "Then why did you hide it from Jojo?" Mo Lien couldn't resist shouting at Yunfei. "Don't you know how good Jojo's pill refining skills are? Although Jojo's alchemy skills are top-notch, he's still young after all." Yun Piaomiao couldn't help but interject, "The soul-returning pill is a sage-level pill. Even though we invited the divine-grade alchemist, His Excellency He Wen, to produce it, we still failed in the end. Although the soul-returning pill was successful, the quality was not pure enough, so, silly." Mo Lien shouted angrily and lowered his head to look at his wife. The little girl looked like she had suffered a huge blow, and her tears soundlessly flowed onto Murong-sun's face. If she had asked Yun Piaomiao clearly that day in the Phoenix Wood Forest, or, if they insisted on not giving him the herbs, they would force him to spit out the truth. Would there be a way out for today's matter? After failing to take the soul-returning pill, there was no hope at all. Do you know? Mo Lien took a deep breath and said, Xiao Qiao successfully concocted a resurrection pill earlier and already saved our royal mother. Yun Fei's eyes suddenly widened, and his body swayed slightly. Yun Piaomiao looked at him in shock and instinctively denied, that's impossible. That's right, don't lie. That's simply impossible. Ni Hanji, who was clutching her severed finger, couldn't help but interject at this moment. She proudly rolled her eyes and said, even my master, a divine-grade pill master, couldn't refine a good quality soul-returning pill. How is that possible? Mo Lien coldly swept a glance at her, successfully intimidating this peacock that opened her mouth and made her timidly close her mouth. The truth is that Mother Queen took the soul-returning pill and has already woken up. Yun Fei's eyes widened in disbelief. Chapter 3983. His expression was a bit bitter, and he turned his head like a mechanical puppet to look at the silent arbor. Is that so, Jojo? Xiao Mu hugged Murong Sun and sat there in a daze. For a moment, it seemed like she couldn't hear or see who was talking to her. Isn't Jojo an Earth-level alchemist? Before we went to Phoenix Grove, Jojo had already advanced to a heaven-level alchemist. But a heaven-level alchemist is worlds apart from a god-level alchemist, Yun Piaomiao could not help but weakly say. Although it was only a difference of one major realm, it was like a natural chasm that was difficult to cross, all right? Mo Lien lowered her eyes and sighed deeply. Why do you have to keep it to yourselves when you encounter a problem and not discuss it with others? It's because this heaven-level alchemist, Jojo, created a resurrection pill a few days ago. If you don't believe me, you can follow us back to Dragon Flame City to see my mother's current condition. Yun Xiong nearly lost his balance and was about to fall to the side. When Zhou Danjin saw this, he hastily went up with several other mentors to support him. Sir He-Wen, who had heard everything from beginning to end, was shocked beyond belief. A heaven-grade alchemist had leapfrogged ranks to challenge the soul-returning pill, and had succeeded, and had really brought the person back to life. This was unheard of, all right. Let alone his disciple, Ni Hanji, who did not believe it, even he did not dare to believe that this was true. Then can she still be saved? Mentor Wei Wei could not help but anxiously ask. Arbor dazedly hugged Murong Sun and did not say anything or look up. She merely lowered her head, thinking about something. Mo Lien knew that she was upset, so she pried her hand away and gently consoled, Jojo, let's put Master in the coffin, all right? Arbor hugged Murong Sun, unwilling to let go. She seemed to have heard Mo Lien talking to her, but in reality, she could not react at all. She only felt that her entire body was stiff and her mind was in a mess. It was as if there were countless voices ringing in her head, but it also felt as if there was no sound at all. Murong Sun died because she, this disciple, was useless and could not save her master. Even if he were to refine the soul-returning pill now, it would be useless. One could only take one soul-returning pill in one's lifetime. If it failed, it would be a complete failure. Otherwise, if a person could come back from the dead many times, wouldn't the heavenly Tao also become chaotic? In any case, as long as the corpse wasn't destroyed, a single pill would be enough to revive the dead, right? Arbor sat there in a daze, hugging his master without saying a word. He was in a daze. Mo Lien involuntarily panicked and she saw Murong Sun's condition. She hastily shook Murong Sun's petite body and recklessly pried Murong Sun away from her arms. She then pulled her pitiful wifey into her embrace. Jojo, Jojo. Don't be afraid, don't worry, I'm here for you. How about we seal Master's body in the star domain first? Mo Lien whispered into her ear, we'll think of another way to revive her for the rest of our lives, okay? Arbor's eyes stung. She felt like there were no more tears left for her to shed. "Can we?" she asked meekly. "Definitely." Mo Lien nodded heavily. He hugged his wifey and asked with heartache, "You don't trust hubby?" Arbor shook her head. "I do." Chapter 3984. At night, Mo Lien walked out of a room in Winter Forest Garden and closed the door behind her. She glanced at Yunfei and the others who were standing in the courtyard. "Let Jojo have a good rest." Mo Lien's voice was very light. The little fellow had just finished refining the soul-returning pill and immediately rushed back to the academy. After receiving such a huge blow, she had to be given some time to recover. Yunfei opened his mouth. "Ah, Suns, just leave Peak Master Murong's ice crystal coffin to us." Mo Lien interrupted Yunfei's words with an indifferent expression. "But, Principal Yun, I know you have good intentions." Mo Lien interrupted him again. "But you can't deny that because of this decision, you missed the best time to save Peak Master Murong. If you were willing to wait, or trust Jojo a little more, perhaps things wouldn't have become as troublesome as they are now." This little friend, Sir He-wen, who had been silent and following behind the crowd, couldn't help but ask, "That lady, with the standard of a heaven-grade alchemist, she really refined the soul-returning pill? How was that possible?" "That was a saint elixir. Even if the phoenix flower was added to the sacred medicine refined by a divine-grade alchemist to increase the success rate to 100%, but the pill that came out of the furnace was still of poor quality. Could a heaven-grade alchemist surpass a divine-grade alchemist in refining? Just thinking about it made it seem impossible." Mo Lien glanced at Alchemist He-wen and said coldly, "In this world, what we don't lack the most are geniuses. What you can't do doesn't mean that Jojo can't do." Everyone was silent. But Mo Lien's attitude of not paying any attention to Alchemist He-wen angered his disciple, Ni Hanji. "You, how can you say that?" Ni Hanji couldn't help but say angrily. When they were at the back mountain of the Royal Academy, this man had swept his cold and terrifying gaze over her. That kind of attitude of not paying any attention to the master and disciple made Ni Hanji so angry that she couldn't help but grit her teeth. "Hanji." He sighed softly, stopping his disciple from continuing. "This old man has thought of a remedy. I hope that when the little girl wakes up tomorrow, I can discuss it with her in detail. Everyone, please return." Mo Lien nodded coldly. Under the dim light of dusk, Yun Piaomiao and the others felt that the young man in front of them had clear and cold features, as cold as snow. His entire body seemed to be wrapped in a thin layer of mist that was as faint as smoke, cold, lofty, and unapproachable. Knowing that the anger in his heart was unbearable, Yun Fiang and Yun Piaomiao couldn't help but close their eyes. They nodded and turned to leave the courtyard listlessly. Yunfei didn't know how he returned to the courtyard. He sat in front of the small table in a daze and stared at the cup of herbal tea on the table. The bitterness in his heart was unbearable. Xiao Mu slept all the way until noon the next day. Lifting the thin satin covering her body, the little girl sat on the edge of the bed expressionlessly, in a daze. Yesterday's events were still vivid in his mind. After 4 years, she saw Murong Sun again, but it was in that icy coffin. Murong Sun was silently lying there without breathing. She didn't know if this counted as seeing her again. The door to the room was pushed open from the outside with a creak. Mo Lien's slender figure stood against the light at the door. When he saw her sitting on the edge of the bed in a daze, he smiled. "You're awake." Arbor abruptly stood up and ran a few steps before abruptly throwing herself into his arms. Chapter 3985. Mo Lien reached out and caught her warm body. He lifted her up and rubbed against her cheek. "Why are you in a daze so early in the morning?" Are you thinking about your husband? This hug really turned all his gentleness into a drizzle, messing up his heart and blinding his eyes. What a troublesome little girl. Arbor raised her little head and blinked. She reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck, snuggling into his embrace. I don't want to go anywhere these few days. I don't want to see anyone. Is that all right? She just wanted to be so willful for once. She didn't want to hear, think, or see anyone. She just wanted to focus on herself for a few days. Okay. Mo Lien nodded slightly and patted her head. Do whatever you want to do. There's no need to have any scruples. Yun Fei and Yun Piaomiao immediately received the news that Donglin Garden had closed its doors and refused to see anyone. He Wen, who had been turned away, could only sigh deeply when he saw the situation. Master, they don't even want to see us. Why do we still have to come knocking on their doors? Weren't they rushing to be turned away? Ni Hanji couldn't help but feel angry. I also have an unshirkable responsibility for this matter, Hewen said in a low voice. Master. Ni Hanji stomped her feet. Your disciples said that we shouldn't have accepted this matter in the first place. Look at the situation now. Instead, we've been blamed by others. Hewen lowered his eyes slightly. In fact, he also had his own selfish motives. When he heard that the other party had gathered all the ingredients and asked him to refine the soul-returning pill, he naturally couldn't wait to come over and try. If he could successfully refine the soul-returning pill on this trip, then he, Wen, would be the unparalleled #1 saint-level alchemist in the world. However, when he thought of this, Hewen couldn't help but laugh bitterly at himself. Hanji, bring me a brush and paper. Master, Ni Hanji called out indignantly. Hewen sighed and glanced at her. Ni Hanji had no other choice but to obediently hand over the brush and paper. Hewen drew a plant on a small stone table at the entrance and noted its name and use. Then, he folded the paper and put it into the faith. This is what I saw in an old and tattered ancient book. I hope it will be of some help to that little friend. Master, shall we leave this lousy academy today? Hewen glanced at her again. Ni Hanji pouted mischievously. Master will return to the guest court to prepare. You can deliver the letter. All right, Master, don't worry. Your disciple will definitely complete the mission. Ni Hanji nodded with a smile. After Hewen left, Ni Hanji snorted and pulled the paper out of the envelope with a pout. He took out a pen and added a few more leaves and a small stamen on the picture of the plant. She then chuckled and put down the pen. After putting the paper back into the envelope, she flicked her finger across the high wall and threw the letter into the envelope. Who told you to be so arrogant? You even dared to give us the cold shoulder. Ni Hanji clapped her hands as she talked to herself and turned to leave triumphantly. When she thought of how Mo Lien and Arbor dared to give her and her master the cold shoulder, she felt extremely displeased. There weren't many female disciples in the inner sect of the Medicine King Island. Ni Hanji had always been the moon surrounded by the stars among her fellow disciples. So when she saw Mo Lien's cold attitude towards her, she couldn't help but feel angry. What's there to be arrogant about? Your master ate the pill and couldn't get up, that's her bad luck. Chapter 3986. How dare they vent their anger on Medicine King Island? Did they think that she, Ni Hanji, was a sick cat? Humph, I'll make you suffer the consequences. Ni Hanji followed Hewen and left the Imperial College that day. Sitting in the air transportation spiritual artifact, Ni Hanji was humming a tune in a good mood. Seeing this, Hewen could not help but smile helplessly. Hanji, did leaving the Royal Academy make you so happy? How much did she despise the Imperial College? Hanji stared blankly for a moment, thinking that she had gotten a little carried away. She quickly stuck out her tongue and retracted her expression, giggling as she said, "Isn't that so, Master? Once we left the Imperial Academy, I felt much more relaxed. In that place, I was always disliked by others, and I always gave them a cold shoulder. Only Master, you have a good temper and can take it." In the past, no matter which city they went to, they would always be treated with respect. It was not like the royal school, where no one paid any attention to them. Hewen shook his head helplessly and started reading the medical book in his hand again. Hanji asked with a smile, "Master, are we returning to Medicine King Island now?" Hewen shook his head and closed the book. He smiled at his disciple. "Let's go to the Imperial capital. The Lin family invited us to make a few spirit breakthrough pills. The income is quite good." Hewen said with a smile. The Lin family has been gaining momentum recently. Ever since they moved from Chengdu to the imperial capital, they have steadily become one of the 6 great aristocratic families. To be able to build a good relationship with the Lin family was something worth Medicine King Island doing. Hanji curled her lips in disdain. What are the 6 great aristocratic families? Can they be compared to our Medicine King Island? I heard that the aristocratic families in the imperial capital are having a hard time. They are being suppressed by the imperial court to the point that they can't breathe. Didn't the Long family have a direct descendant who was suppressed and thrown into prison? Although the entire family managed to escape in the end, they gave up all their assets in the imperial capital and fled with their tails between their legs. That tragic scene must have been very wretched. Hewen looked at his disciple and stroked her head. Imperial power is naturally supreme in the imperial capital. Hanji, you have to rein in your willful temper. Hewen said helplessly. He had brought this disciple of his by his side since she was young. Rather than calling her a disciple, it would be more accurate to say that he had taken care of her like his own granddaughter. She was young, so Hewen naturally indulged her more. Furthermore, Hewen had always felt that his disciple's temperament was very pure and kind. How could he have known that she would go against his wishes and secretly change the plant drawings he had drawn? The self-righteous Hewen did not know what the consequences would be in the end if he blindly doted on this disciple. Let's not talk about the master and disciple going to the capital. In Arbor, however, they received a letter from Hanji. She sat there and watched silently for a while, not saying anything for a long time. Mo Lien frowned. She took her little hand and asked, "Jojo, could it be that this old man's reputation is false, and that his prescription is actually useless?" Arbor shook his head. "I already know this method. Using the Bodhi Revival grass as the catalyst to create the Bodhi Revival pill, I still need a few other ingredients. This prescription is an extremely ancient one," Arbor said indifferently with furrowed brows. He didn't expect Hewen to know about it. He was indeed capable. Chapter 3987. Stoneflower and the heart of a 10,000-year-old phoenix wood, Arbor said softly. "I already have these 2 materials. The last one is the blood of the blue-eyed 3-headed dog." Arbor lowered his eyes and said aloofly, "This is an ancient ferocious beast. I've only seen it in ancient texts." Mo Lien was startled when she heard that. She lowered her eyes and pondered for a moment. "We saw the blue-eyed 3-headed dog when we were challenging the Tower of Punishment." Arbor was startled and looked at her. "You're saying you've fought with it before?" Mo Lien shook her head. "We haven't. It's just that we saw its carving on a stone door when we were challenging the floor's checkpoint." Arbor nodded. "That means the legend isn't completely absurd and baseless. This ferocious beast should exist." Arbor sighed and put down the letter in his hand. "As long as this thing exists in the world, we can find it no matter how difficult it is." Mo Lien grasped his wife's hand and quietly asked, "Why are you still so gloomy when you have a solution?" Arbor shook his head. "Master's soul is shattered and can't hold on for too long." And with her current body, Arbor sighed softly. She has to first nurture that shattered soul before taking the pill. Otherwise, her body wouldn't be able to endure it at all. Although the blue-eyed three-headed dog existed in the world, it would be extremely difficult to find it in a short period of time. Murong Sun's soul could only hold on for a year at most. Then He Wen's prescription isn't actually useful anymore, right? Mo Lien asked with a frown. Arbor nodded. The revival Bodhi grass he drew isn't quite right either. The revival Bodhi grass's leaves are needle-shaped and it never blossoms nor bears fruit. Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh coldly. She wondered if this Master He Wen was someone who fished for fame. Why would he draw a nondescript medicinal plant for Jojo to use as a reference? If Jojo had not seen the herb before, he might have followed the plant map he had given him to find the resurrection Bodhi herb, wouldn't he? In the end, it was a waste of time and a wasted search. I saw it on the 3rd floor of the Longevity Temple on the main star. After saying that, Arbor abruptly stood up, a look of excitement appearing on his small face. How could I forget? The 2nd floor has many medicines and pills concocted by Ant Master and Master. Perhaps they can be of help to Murong Sun. She paced back and forth in front of Mo Lien with small steps, her small face flushed red from agitation. "Lien, let's go in and take a look." Mo Lien nodded. The two of them left the room and entered the Longevity Temple on the main planet. Arbor pulled Mo Lien and sprinted toward the 2nd floor. Master must have concocted a pill to stabilize the soul. She pulled out a piece of frost jade with the red deity attached to it from her neck. "If it doesn't work, then let's give this piece of soul-calming frost jade to Murong Sun first." The little fellow prattled on as she pulled Mo Lien to the 2nd floor. She headed straight for the rows of cabinets leaning against the wall and rummaged through them. Mo Lien helped her take down the wooden boxes placed on the top 2 floors one by one. Arbor flipped through them and took a box with a large red peony painting from Mo Lien's hands. As soon as she opened the box, a faint medicinal fragrance wafted out. Mo Lien couldn't help but inwardly click her tongue. Jojo's 2 almighty masters were truly extravagant. Every box placed on the cabinets was priceless. Chapter 3988. Arbor's eyes brightened. Soul-nurturing pill. This pill was perfect for Murong Sun to consume. It would nourish her body and imperceptibly repair her soul. At least before she found the cerulean, she could feed Murong Sun 1 pill every half a month so that her soul would not scatter. Murong Sun was severely injured back then and did not receive timely treatment, hence, her condition was actually much more serious than Lien's mother's. "Jojo, are you blaming Headmaster Yun for acting on his own?" Mo Lien could not help but shake Murong Sun's hand when she saw Murong Sun sinking into her own contemplation while holding the pill. Arbor returned to her senses and shook her head at him. Only incompetent people would blame this and that. "I don't blame anyone." She could not blame Yun Fiang for not trusting him and asking for another brilliant pill alchemist from Medicine King Island. After all, Yun Fiang's motive was good and also to save Murong Sun. Moreover, if he did not arrive in time back then and bring Murong Sun back, perhaps Murong Sun would only be left with a head like 3rd Ant Master when she arrived. Arbor could not help but shudder when she thought of this. What right did she have to blame others? It was because she was incompetent as a disciple that she could not help her master. As for Sir He Wen, he was only an outsider to them, so it was already pretty good that an outsider could do this much. Although he had no lack of selfishness in wanting to make a name for himself, how could she force an outsider to do his best for her master? Jojo. Mo Lien's heart ached inwardly, and she hugged the little girl and kissed her. You're only missing the cerulean's blood now, right? Don't worry, we'll definitely find it. Sometimes, the little girl was so sensible that it made one's heart ache. If she vented her anger on Yunfiang and Hewen, perhaps she would feel better in her heart. However, she simply disdained to vent her anger on them. Murong Sun was her master, her family, so the little girl shouldered the responsibility of saving Murong Sun alone. Mo Lien lifted her chin and nuzzled her face. The Tower of Punishment was set up by heavenly law. That ferocious beast had already escaped before we escaped. At least, we didn't find it in the remaining stone doors on that floor. That means it ran away long ago. It didn't stay in the Tower of Punishment. As a guardian beast, it ran away. Do you think the heavenly axiom, with its stingy character, will let it go? Xiao Mu blinked her large eyes. What Lian meant was that ferocious beast was definitely hiding in some corner of the world and playing dead right now. Which nook and cranny are we going to find it? Xiao asked curiously. Mo Lien chuckled. We can put out a warrant for it. Xiao Mu's small chin almost dropped to the ground. Put it on the wanted list. Hunt a ferocious beast. Lord Xichao suddenly felt that this beast was so unlucky. It had finally escaped from prison, but now it was suddenly wanted by all 3 provinces. Who could it find to reason with? Mo Lien nodded with a grin. We'll send people to Jiwei City to issue a mission. On the surface, we'll have all the assassins in the underground black market come out to find it. Secretly, we'll mobilize people from the hidden night pavilion to secretly search and gather all the clues to verify their authenticity. When the time comes, there will be news. There's another possibility. Mo Lien stroked her wifey's hair and softly said, perhaps it's hiding beside some almighty figure and hiding from heavenly law. Chapter 3989. Lady Jojo blinked her eyes. If that's the case, this ferocious beast might really have found a host and stayed by that person's side to retire. Mo Lien inwardly chuckled and nodded. She looked down at the box in her hands. Let's give it to Master first. Arbor nodded and pocketed several more bottles of nutrient fluid before pulling Mo Lien out of the Hall of Longevity and flying to Paradise Planet. Ever since the star domain advanced to the god domain and the main planet opened up, the time flow on Paradise Planet was equal to the main planet's 12-fold speed. Arbor looked at the ice crystal coffin sitting on the slope of Paradise Planet and crouched next to the open coffin, feeding a soul-nurturing pill into Murong Sun's mouth. Cho-cho. The little tray ant bounced over energetically and circled around Arbor with its head. Arbor handed it a box of pills. From now on, feed one to my master every half a month. The little tray ant naturally nodded and complained, those 3 little puppies have been circling Phoenix Spring all day long. Look at how they've absorbed so many good things, but their bodies haven't improved at all. They're simply wasting their divine power. Arbor was startled and then shook his head. Let them be. The little tray ant harumphed and stomped along with its little master while hugging the box. It then complained, they're too noisy, so I threw them into the mine. Arbor, as long as they didn't run to the main planet and destroy her little courtyard, it had nothing to do with Sir Jojo. Arbor and Mo Lien left the star domain and returned to Donglin Court's wing. Arbor glanced at the letter that fell to the ground and shook his head. It's useless. Mo Lien was a bit angry when she saw the herbs drawn on it and directly burned the paper. What god-rank pill refiner from Medicine King Island? You're simply fishing for fame. Mo Lien said angrily, since you don't even know what that saint-grade medicinal plant looks like, why do you have to go the extra mile and draw it? Arbor's eyes flashed for a moment before he felt relieved. Don't worry about him. When are we going to Jiwei City to announce the news? Today. Mo Lien raised her eyebrows and took out her communication jade talisman. Prince Mo's spies could be said to be all over the world. He even had spies in Song Prefecture's Phoenix Emperor City. How could he not have spies in a no-man's land like Jiawei City? After releasing the news, Mo Lien turned her head and winked at Arbor. She smiled and said, Jiawei City will soon be in chaos because of this news. What are your conditions? 100 million spirit coins. Xiao Mu swallowed her saliva. Wow, it really is His Highness the Crown Prince, who is filthy rich and overbearing. The bait he set out was so enticing, so how could it not attract so many of Jiawei City's warriors, who scrambled to be the first to come out in search of ferocious beasts? 2 days later, not to mention the entire Jiawei City, even the imperial court of the upper 3 prefectures was shocked by this news. A mysterious person offered a sky-high price of 100 million spirit coins to buy a living cerulean 3-headed dog. All the mercenary teams and adventurer teams on the continent were in an uproar. Everyone began to go to the various adventure holy lands together to search for traces of this ferocious beast. Chaotic news flooded the channel set up by the Hidden Night Pavilion like snowflakes. 20 days later. Dragon Flame City, in the newly opened Lin Family Restaurant. Many diners were talking about this big event that shook the 3 prefectures. Chapter 3990. Arbor and Mo Lien stayed in the academy to cultivate in seclusion and did not see anyone. They only chatted with Yun Fiang and Yun Piaomiao before leaving the academy. Speaking of saving Murong Sun, Arbor naturally hoped that he would be given full authority to handle this matter. Yun Fiang was deeply affected, so he naturally could not stop the little girl. He only told her to tell him whatever she needed and dejectedly left Donglin Court. Although the little girl did not blame him at all from beginning to end, he still could not get over the hurdle of self-blame in his heart. It was not impossible for him to walk out from this blow. As long as Murong Sun woke up, the knot in everyone's hearts would naturally be completely resolved. I will definitely save Master. Arbor secretly said this in his mind. 20 days later, Arbor and Mo Lien leisurely returned to Dragonflame City. When they arrived at Kaidai Veranda's entrance, they discovered that the Lin family restaurant had opened across the street at some point in time. Arbor called out to Manager Hu, and Manager Hu immediately ran out and beamed from ear to ear. Crown Prince, Crown Princess, you're here. Quickly invite them in. Arbor saw that his Kaidai veranda was still packed with guests. When he saw the diners all standing up to greet him, he waved his hand and said, "No need to be so courteous. Sit down and continue eating." Everyone hastily thanked him before sitting down with a smile. Arbor and Mo Lien did not disturb them and followed Manager Hu to a private room on the 2nd floor. On the way there, Arbor purposely looked at the rooms on the 2nd floor. He saw that the rooms were already occupied by guests and there was not a single empty room. It was clear that business was still flourishing. It was actually almost past mealtime right now, so other restaurants could not compare to having such good business. Arbor sat down and scooted over to the Crown Prince, who was fanning himself, to enjoy the cool breeze. He also asked curiously, "Old Hu, the Lin family restaurant that opened across the street can't be the Lin family I'm thinking of, right? Why did they name it so casually?" Old Hu was attentively entertaining the two of them, asking the waiters to quickly serve up some of their signature dishes. She rolled her eyes and said, "Who else could it be? Wasn't it the Lin family from Rong City? Hee hee. They've been fighting with our Kaidai loft for 7 days now." Speaking of this, shopkeeper Hu had a belly full of anger. Every day, there are special discounts, and they even go around the streets to recruit people. Hey, they even found a few good-looking young men from Spring Full House to flirt with those ants. He recruited all of them. Mo Lien, looking at Old Hu's belly full of anger, he probably had been holding it in for more than a day or two. But I saw it just now. Our business is still good. Of course. When Old Who mentioned this, his face was filled with pride and joy as he said, "Can other people eat our Kaidai veranda's dish, the holy rice? Even if she pulled a few naked people over to lie in front of their door, they might not be able to compete with us." Old Hoot spoke sneakily, only to realize that the Crown Prince glanced at him indifferently after he finished speaking. He hurriedly raised his hand to slap his mouth and chuckled. This old servant misspoke. How could he say such vulgar words in front of the little Crown Princess? No wonder the Crown Prince glared at him. As they spoke, they heard the sound of gongs and drums from across the street. The little Crown Princess excitedly leaned against the window to take a look. The scenery on the other side looks a little familiar. Chapter 3991. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, purple. 7 figures that were as thin as lightning stood at the entrance of the Lin family restaurant, immediately causing the young ladies and young wives on the street to scream. Yeah, whoa, 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 whoa. A bunch of ear-piercing sounds instantly rushed into Arbor's ears. The little fellow subconsciously covered her ears with her hands, but her gaze fell on the 7 figures in front of the restaurant across the street. She seemed to be deep in thought. Ha! Prince Mo's cool laughter suddenly sounded in her ears. Very nice to see. Sir Jojo turned around and looked at him blankly. Who? Mo Lien pursed her lips, secretly suppressing the urge to laugh. Red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, purple. After parting last year and meeting again today, don't you think it's nice to see them? The little girl turned her head and looked at the 7 figures in front of the Lin family restaurant. I know them. This time, it was Prince Mo's turn to be a little stunned. That's right, the little fellow's memory of miscellaneous matters was not very deep. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but secretly laugh. Of course he wouldn't remind her who these people were. At the entrance of the restaurant next door, there was a 50% discount sign. It led the passing women and young ladies into the restaurant, making a lot of noise. Arbor propped up her little chin with one hand and asked shopkeeper Who doubtfully, Old Who, do they do this every day? Isn't that so? Speaking of this Lin family restaurant, Old Who had countless things to complain about. What's the use of lowering the price every day? Can they attract business with just a few beauties? Shopkeeper Hoot said angrily, if the quality of the dishes doesn't improve, people will still only recognize our Kaidai restaurant. Arbor nodded with her chin in her hand. Suddenly, she tugged at Mo Lien's sleeve. Look at that. Mo Lien reluctantly looked over and saw that there was a sudden commotion at the entrance of the Lin family restaurant. A familiar-looking woman found another person on the street to put on a show of martial arts and suddenly started fighting. As they fought, the flower stand that was originally set up at the entrance was suddenly pushed to the ground. The bouquet of flowers scattered all over the ground. The 7 beauties also cried out and scattered in all directions. Arbor rolled his eyes and couldn't bear to watch. This idiot Mu Dongni picked a fight with someone on the street and made the Mu family lose face. Just as she was about to close the window and stop watching this farce, she suddenly saw a green-clothed beauty among the 7 beauties looking up at her. This was nothing much, but the beauty's eyes suddenly lit up. She waved at him and even pulled the other 6 beauties beside her. The 7 of them looked at her in unison. Immediately, they stretched out their claws and waved them at her, shouting at her excitedly. Qiao Mu creased her brows and looked at them in bewilderment. What the hell? These people did look familiar, but she couldn't remember where she had seen them before. On the other side, Mu Dongni was gradually getting angry with that woman. Suddenly, she turned to look in her direction and was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, she received a fierce slap on the face and immediately yelled hatefully, "Gu Daojian, you dare to slap this old lady's face? You must be tired of living." Arbor looked coldly at Mu Dongni, who had overstepped her bounds, and said grumpily, "Send a message to old Master Mu and have him send someone to take her back." As soon as her voice fell, one of the women fiercely pulled out a 7-foot-long sword and stabbed at Mu Dongni. Chapter 3992. Fuck, these two people were viciously brawling on the streets. Not only did their fight hurt the eyes, but they were even pointing their swords at each other now. What kind of deep-seated hatred was this? Did they need to do this? Arbor flicked her finger, and a jade porcelain wine cup bounced off Gu Daojian's long sword with a whoosh as swift as a clap of thunder. The latter only felt her wrist go numb, and the sword in her hand immediately fell to the ground with a clang. Prince Mo couldn't resist facepalming. He swiftly reached out to grab it, but he only caught a strand of his wifey's sleeve that floated past his fingers. The little girl directly jumped down from Kaidai Pavilion's window and flew to Mu Dongni and Gu Daojian. Mu Dongni looked back and scrambled to her side, shouting in alarm, "Niece! Beat her up! Beat this stinking, shameless old hag to death!" When Gu Daojian heard this, her face instantly darkened, and she turned to yell at Mu Dongni, "Nothing good comes out of a filthy mouth. Who's an old hag? You're the old hag. Don't forget, you're a year older than me. Eldest niece, look at this old hag. She actually said that about us." Mu Dongni was just about to howl when the little stoic glared at her icily. She suddenly felt like she didn't dare to howl anymore, useless thing. Arbor swept her a disdainful glance before her gaze landed on Gu Daojian, sizing her up. Gu Daojian was also in a very sorry state after fighting with Mu Dongni just now. Not only was her left eye bruised, but the corner of her mouth was also scratched by Mu Dongni's sharp nails. No wonder she was so angry that she drew her sword and wanted to stab Mu Dongni to death. Arbor restrained her temper and asked with a cold expression, "What is it?" Mu Dongni immediately felt like she had found a backer, so she quickly crawled over and wailed, "It's all because of this old hag who maliciously tried to steal my Meng Meng. Meng Meng is mine. Meng Meng." Arbor only felt that Mu Dongni's crying was an eyesore, so he impatiently yelled at her, "What are you crying for? Speak properly." Mu Dongni immediately stopped sobbing and pretended to wipe her tears. She stole a glance at Gu Daojian and said in a low voice, "Gu Daojian clearly knew that I wanted to redeem Meng Meng, but she still jumped out to compete with me. Tell me, how evil is this old woman?" Arbor asked expressionlessly, "Who is Dreamy?" I know. That beauty in green ran to the little stoic side with a grin. "He's talking about one of our spring house's top young brothers, Fan Mang." Arbor cast a sideways glance at the green-clothed beauty before turning his cold little face to Mu Dongni. "Didn't you say you wanted to redeem the top performer of the Despondent Pavilion a while ago? What's his name again?" Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Kai Xiao, who had caught up, could not help but twitch the corner of her mouth. She stepped forward and whispered, "The ace of the Qin family troupe, Brother Rong." "Oh." Arbor nodded expressionlessly. She turned to point at Mu Dongni and grumpily reprimanded, "How can you be so fickle?" Mu Dongni looked dumbfoundedly at this eldest niece of hers. "It wasn't good to talk about this here, right on the side." The one-eyed Gu Daojian couldn't help but chuckle and gloat, "She's not just fickle, she simply loves whoever she sees." Mu Dongni's face darkened, and she angrily kicked Gu Daojian. "What nonsense are you spouting? Who's fickle?" Chapter 3993. Ever since I saw my Meng Meng. Mu Dongni revealed a dreamy and blissful expression. "I knew I found my true love. My heart belongs to someone. I can definitely grow old with my Meng Meng in the future. I'll destroy whoever dares to snatch Meng Meng from me. Mu Dongni bared her teeth and turned to roar at Gu Daojian. She then scrambled over to Qiao Mu and tugged at the corner of her skirt. Eldest niece, you must help me. You must help me. Second great aunt. Mu Dongni turned her head and saw Zhan Ju rushing over with 7 to 8 elderly nannies and pulling her up from the ground in a flurry. Second great aunt, don't make a fuss. Your matter has already reached the elderly sir's ears. Hurry and come back with us. I'm not going back, I'm not going back. Mu Dongni yelled angrily and stretched out her leg to kick Gu Daojian. Gu Daojian, I'm telling you, you're not allowed to compete with me at the spring gathering tomorrow night. Gu Daojian gave her a "who cares about you" expression and glared at her. Eldest niece, help me. Help me, eldest niece. Mu Dongni shrieked as she kicked her leg. Arbor expressionlessly watched her figure being dragged far away. She took out a handkerchief and leisurely wiped her clothes where she had grabbed. She turned around and burned the handkerchief to ashes. Everyone was stupefied. How can someone from the Mu family be this stupid? The little stoic shook her head and was about to move when someone reached out to stop her. What is it? Arbor glanced indifferently at the man in green blocking her path. That guy waved his hand in front of her and said with a grin, "Little stoic, long time no see. If you're free tomorrow, why don't you come visit our spring gathering pavilion?" Emichem, Emichem. The man in blue also ran up and blinked his large eyes at her. Our pavilion is holding a spring gathering tomorrow. There will be all kinds of good performances. It's going to be lively. The little stoic faced the crowd with a stoic expression. I'm not free. Before she could open her mouth, a deep voice drifted over from behind her, directly rejecting the offer on her behalf. Qiao Mu blinked, but before she could turn around, she was pulled back into a certain person's embrace by a hand. The green-clothed beauty curled her lips and stole a glance at Mo Lien with an aggrieved expression. This young master, why are you so fierce? Mo Lien glared fiercely at him. This bastard actually dared to lure his wife to such a foul place like the spring-filled house. The little stoic turned to look at her husband's huff and puff and tugged at his finger. Let's go home. Her husband didn't seem to like the colors red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. If that was the case, then Jojo did not want to see them. In any case, they weren't familiar with each other. It was just a chance encounter. Husband, I remember now. We also encountered these people when we were on Seacone Planet, right? Who would have thought that a small gambling den could actually operate in the upper 3 prefectures? The boss of this whatever spring house was probably a rather impressive figure. Mo Lien looked down at her and said with a grin, that's right. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, blue, and purple. Aren't they beautiful? Arbor quickly shook his head and swiftly added, they're not as beautiful as Duan Yu. Prince Mo's handsome face completely darkened what was going on with his wifey always using Duan Yu as a standard. Could this habit be changed? Chapter 3994. Speaking of Duan Yu, Jojo had been busy searching for the blue-eyed three-headed dog's blood recently because of Master's matter. Aside from cultivating in seclusion in the academy, the two devoted themselves to the matter of the blood. Duan Yu's matter had indeed been delayed. Mo Lien grasped Arbor's hand. Something happened on Duan Yu's side. Arbor was startled. What happened? Mo Lien organized her thoughts and planned to make a long story short to tell her wife about Duan Yu's side. However, she saw Hao Fei rushing over with her entourage and visibly sighing in relief when she saw the two of them. Hao Fei dismounted from her horse and strode forward. She quickly cupped her hands and greeted, greetings to Crown Prince and Crown Princess. You two have finally returned. Crown Princess, Heavenly Pill Auction received a letter from Tsangzhou's Prince Chen more than 10 days ago. The various physicians in the auction repeatedly examined the items Prince Chen sent and did not find any problems. Mo Lian and Arbor took the reins from the manservant and followed Hao Fei to Heavenly Pill Auction. At the entrance of the Lin family's restaurant, the 7 flowers looked at each other. Their bright eyes looked at each other. On the other side, the young couple soon arrived at the southern part of the city. The two of them followed Hao Fei through the door and happened to bump into Fairy Huang He. Huang He's eyes brightened, and she exclaimed in pleasant surprise, "Jojo, you're back." Arbor nodded and jogged over. She patted her and asked, "Little Huang He, how have you been recently?" "Pretty good." She would refine pills in her free time and occasionally enter closed-door cultivation to cultivate. Her days were too comfortable. Most importantly, she had someone to chat with. Xiaomu nodded upon hearing this and was led inside by the two people. Soon, Fairy Yellow Crane accompanied her into a small, independent alchemy room. In this small alchemy room, in addition to the alchemy furnace that was half the height of a person, there was also a bamboo rack that was used to store medicinal herbs. Fairy Yellow Crane took down an item wrapped in a square handkerchief from the top of the shelf. She carefully opened it and used a pair of tweezers to take out a fingernail. Arbor's face sank. He summoned the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron, took the fingernail, and began to examine it. Not long after, Fairy Yellow Crane accompanied Arbor out of the pill room. Prince Mo was sitting in the inner hall, quietly drinking tea. When he saw the two of them come out, he stood up and asked, "How is it?" Yellow Crane Fairy clenched her fists angrily. Jojo found out. It's the poison of the soul-devouring flower. This substance is completely colorless and odorless when mixed with the rouge and powder used by the human body. If it is applied for a long time, it will imperceptibly poison the person. Only at a certain point in time, we can use the primer to completely detonate it, and the person will die silently. Fairy Yellow Crane said angrily, "Too despicable." This soul-devouring flower was completely useless against Shuzha. It can only bully mortal women. Mo Lian silently lowered her eyes. It was not important whether it was useful to other people. It was enough that it could strike a blow to Duan Yu. If it is applied for a long time. Mo Lian asked softly, could it be that they were targeted the moment they returned to Tsang province? And Duan Yu's mother was poisoned? Seeing Arbor's silence, Fairy Yellow Crane nodded and said, "It should be so. If one ingests a little bit of this thing every day, its medicinal properties are not enough to take a person's life. It would take at least half a year or more. Human hearts are vicious." Fairy Yellow Crane clenched her fists. Chapter 3995. Fairy Yellow Crane shook her head and sighed. Whose path can a mortal woman obstruct? The little stoic small face was grim, and her eyes were brimming with bone-chilling chilliness. That guy must have been feeling terrible recently, right? She could empathize with the loss of his closest mother. How was he doing right now? Mo Lian pulled her small hand and said softly, "I've already sent people to inquire. That guy has been staying on Lonely Mountain's Imperial Mausoleum this past month. However, I heard that the Tsangzhou Emperor suddenly fainted during a royal court session the day before yesterday. His health, however, is deteriorating with each passing day. Empress Liu, the second prince, and the third prince's mother are fighting fiercely in the harem," Mo Lian said aloofly as she set down the teacup in her hand. "The royal court is also in a constant state of turmoil. The current Tsangzhou has Eagle City zombies causing chaos on the outside, while the courtiers and palace concubines are fighting endlessly on the inside. I'm afraid that once the Tsangzhou Emperor dies, Ming Province will make a move against them. It was impossible for him not to take a bite out of such a big piece of fat meat. Arbor paced back and forth in front of Mo Lien with her small paws behind her back. How about we make a trip there? Mo Lien shook her head. We shouldn't go and add to the chaos. Duan Yu will definitely make a move soon. We only need to send Sangzhou's spies to secretly cooperate. If we head to Sangzhou right now, we will definitely leave some traces. However, if someone catches hold of this and accuses him of treason and collusion with the Divine Province, it will be very unsightly. Arbor sat down next to him in a huff. Then we can't do anything. Of course not. A cold glint flitted through Mo Lien's eyes, and he gripped his wife's small paws with a grin. We can add fuel to the fire. Let them fall into complete chaos. Your Majesty. Great Eunuch Laifu ran over in a panic, nearly bumping into a floor-to-ceiling screen as he stumbled along the way. What is it? The Zhangzhou Emperor looked up with a slightly pale face. Left Prime Minister Wu Yong and General Zhou request an audience. Recently, the Zhangzhou Emperor's health had been deteriorating day by day. It seemed to be an illness that had suddenly broken out. But in fact, the eunuchs and palace maids who were close to His Majesty all knew very well. 2 years ago, His Majesty's health had already deteriorated. He had been injured by the poison a few years ago, and now that this body could no longer suppress it, it suddenly erupted. It was normal for him to faint during the court session. So he didn't have enough time. Zhangzhou's Emperor Rong Yuan coughed lightly and waved his hand. Let them in. Left Prime Minister Wu Yong and Great General Zhou Chao quickly walked in and bowed. Your Majesty. There's an urgent report from the border. The Divine Land has suddenly mobilized 1 million troops and stationed them in the border stronghold of Fengyang City. The Tsang Prefecture Emperor was stunned, and then his eyes widened in disbelief. He knew that if he were to fall ill or even die, someone would definitely make a move. But what he expected was that the Underworld Prefecture would make a move. The surrounding small tribes might want to eat a piece of meat from the Tsang Prefecture and get a share of the profits. But he never expected that the Divine Land would make the first move. Cough, cough, cough. The Tsang Prefecture Emperor's expression suddenly changed and he coughed. Who is it? Is it Mo Luxing? General Zhou hurriedly shook his head. I heard that the order was given by the Crown Prince of the Divine Land. Recently, the Empress has just woken up, and the Emperor of the Divine Land doesn't have the time to care about other things. The Crown Prince is now handling the court affairs on his behalf. Chapter 3996. This brat is really bold. The Tsang Prefecture Emperor was so angry that he almost couldn't catch his breath and passed out. Your Majesty. General Zhou cupped his fists with a calm face. Please allow this subject to lead the troops to the border of Fengyang City. The Tsang Prefecture Emperor pinched the corners of his eyes tiredly and nodded. Pass down the order. Zhou Chao is to lead 500,000 troops to Fengyang City first. The Tsang Prefecture Emperor suddenly coughed loudly and patted the table beside him. He turned to ask Lai Fu, is 4th Prince still at Lonely Mountain? Go and summon him back. Reporting, the Imperial Bodyguard led the Featherwood Guard commander and the magistrate in a hurry. Before Lai Fu could report, he hurriedly knelt down and saluted. Reporting to Your Majesty, at 10:00 in the morning today, bandits of unknown origin rushed into Minister Lu's residence and killed everyone on sight. By the time the Featherwood Guard rushed over, all the bandits had already disappeared without a trace. However, the entire Phoenix Emperor City's 4 gates are now under the control of the Featherwood Guard's army. The Tsang Prefecture Emperor was shocked, and his expression instantly changed. Bandits of unknown origin broke into Minister Lu's residence. In broad daylight, right inside the Phoenix, the Arch City. Were they so insolent? How could there be such insolent bandits? Who would believe this if they told others about it? Who would think it was normal? The Tsang Prefecture Emperor pursed his lips and said coldly, "What's the result of the investigation?" The Featherwood Guard commander's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He exchanged glances with the Imperial Capital Magistrate and wiped his sweat at the same time. He said in a low voice, "Reporting to Your Majesty, the result of the investigation is that the bandits, bang." Rong Yuan casually picked up a jade cup and smashed it at their feet. Everyone was so scared that their faces turned pale and they kept their mouths shut. Bandits, bandits, bandits. Where did these bandits come from? How could they be so bold? Do you really believe what you're saying? The Imperial Capital Magistrate bowed and said while dripping with sweat, Your Majesty, please allow us to report. It's this humble subject and the others who did not do our job well. Please, Your Majesty, give us a few more days. This humble subject and the others will definitely investigate this matter to the end. Just as they were talking, a sharp cry came from outside the palace and entered the palace through the door. A young eunuch came in with a bitter face and reported, "The Empress is outside crying and begging to see His Majesty. Your servants can't stop him at all." The Tsangzhou Emperor's face darkened. "Send the Empress back to the palace first. I'll be there later." After the eunuch left, the crying outside became louder, which annoyed the Tsangzhou Emperor. He rubbed his forehead and said in a tired voice, "Let her in." After a short while, Empress Lu rushed in with a pale face. She immediately prostrated herself on the ground and cried, "Your Majesty, please uphold justice. Prince Chen, Rongli is insane. For the sake of your own selfish desires, you actually destroyed my entire family. I beg Your Majesty to uphold justice for this concubine's family." Left Prime Minister Wu Yong said indifferently, "Does the Empress have any basis for her words?" Great General Zhou Chao also nodded. "If you don't have any evidence, it's better not to speak carelessly." "Your Majesty." Empress Lu threw herself in front of the Tsangzhou Emperor and cried with snot and tears, "Your Majesty." Except for Prince Chen, who would do such a crazy thing to the Prime Minister's mansion in the near future. Empress Lu said angrily, "Your Majesty. I request to punish this evil bandit and bring justice to our Lu family." "Your Majesty, nearly 10,000 refugees have gathered at the city gate and are crying for justice." Chapter 3997. At the same time, a deputy commander of the Featherwood Guard also hurried into the palace, bringing with him a piece of shocking news. The 6 bandits who broke into the Lu estate to commit murder and arson had all surrendered themselves. Empress Lu's vision darkened when she heard this, and her face contorted as she exclaimed, "This Empress wants to see which bandits are so audacious to break into my Prime Minister's estate to commit murder." She was certain that this matter was related to Duan Yu. However, those murderous bandits suddenly came to admit their guilt. What exactly was going on? Empress Lu speculated in her mind, but she was troubled by the lack of evidence to accuse Duan Yu. It was obvious that this whole thing had been planned from the beginning. From the moment the bandits broke into their Lu estate and slaughtered everyone in their estate to the moment the culprit came out to admit his guilt, the timing of everything was perfect. They stirred up a storm in the entire imperial capital, yet they wanted to calm it down all of a sudden. Who gave you the guts to toy with this Empress like this? Empress Lu's sharp nails dug into her palms, and her eyes revealed a sharp and ruthless glint. Because a large number of refugees had rushed to the capital's city gates, the Tsang province's emperor could only send Wu Yong to investigate. This matter's eruption was strange and bizarre. However, the situation continued to develop in a strange direction, and it wasn't something that she, as the master of the imperial harem, could control. On the second day of the court assembly, several impeachment memorials were presented to the Tsang province's emperor. They were all impeaching Prime Minister Lu's family for seizing land and occupying forests on the outskirts of the capital, causing nearly 10,000 townspeople to become homeless and destitute. Was this matter very strange? Of course it wasn't. Which high official or wealthy merchant in the capital didn't purchase a few farmsteads or fields near the capital's outskirts? However, Prime Minister Lu's family had driven away a large number of residents because of the matter of seizing land. Whether there were nearly 10,000 refugees or not, it was obvious that no one wanted to investigate this specific number. In reality, even if the other officials had also done this kind of immoral thing, they all went with the flow and directly pushed the blame for the nearly 10,000 refugees onto Prime Minister Lu's family. In any case, the dead couldn't testify, right? Could it be that you, Prime Minister Lu, could crawl out of the ground and cry for justice? Impeachment memorials fell on the emperor's desk like snowflakes. Everyone was filled with righteous indignation and criticized Prime Minister Lu's family. They accused the government of forcing the people to rebel, of forcing them to be bandits in the mountains, and of forcing them to kill their entire family in the middle of the night. This was completely because the commoners couldn't live anymore. Therefore, they could only think of such an extreme method. They chose 6 men of sacrifice to kill Prime Minister Lu and his family. Although this matter was full of doubts. For example, why did it erupt so suddenly? How did the tens of thousands of refugees live in the past? Why did they have to choose to expose this matter at this time? What made Empress Lu's vision go dark the most was that the 6 bandits who had pleaded guilty had actually all written confessions and blood letters the night before, and had all committed suicide in the prison. The blood letter was presented to the emperor by a high official of the Ministry of Justice during the morning court session. The great emperor read the bloody letter and scolded the Lu family. After the court, he rushed to the empress' palace and scolded her. Empress Lu didn't sleep last night, and today she was scolded so miserably by the emperor. That night, she was so angry that she couldn't eat a mouthful of food. Imperial noble consort Qing is here. The eunuch's voice made Empress Lu, who was in tears, suddenly stand up from the couch. Chapter 3998. Empress Lu stood so fast that she couldn't help but shake violently. She felt darkness in front of her and almost fell down. The chief maid beside her quickly reached out to support her and said in a trembling voice, "Your Highness." Imperial noble consort Qing walked in gracefully, stroked her slightly bulging belly, and looked at the embarrassed woman in front of her with a faint smile. This lowly medicine woman actually climbed up to the position of imperial noble consort from a small noble lady in just a few months. Now she was really the first person after the empress. Empress Lu wouldn't believe that there was no one who helped her behind the scenes. "Are you here to laugh at me?" "Of course not." Imperial noble consort Qing lowered her eyebrows slightly and looked gentle and graceful. "I heard that something happened in your family. I think you must be suffering these days." Thinking of the condensed fragrance pill that His Majesty gave me the other day, I specially sent it to you. It can help to refresh your mind and replenish your strength. Empress Lu's face was slightly pale, and she stared at a small box handed over by the maid behind Imperial noble consort Qing. Suddenly, he stretched out his hand and slapped the box to the ground. The box fell heavily on the ground with a muffled sound. Imperial noble consort Qing shook her head with a regretful expression. What a good condensed fragrance pill. Just like that, he was ruined by his elder sister. What a pity. Get out. Get out of here. Empress Lu pointed in the direction of the door and scolded harshly. Imperial noble consort Qing bowed slowly and sighed. "I can understand that you are in a bad mood. Since you want me to leave, I will leave. I just hope you can take good care of yourself. After all, these wonderful days had just begun." Imperial noble consort Qing turned around, and there was a faint cold light in her eyes. They are all against me, all against me. Empress Lu shrieked and pulled the antique shelf next to her. The dazzling collection of porcelain fell to the ground with a crashing sound. Her prime minister's mansion was gone. The whole Lu family was killed by a group of bandits. Wasn't this a very funny thing? The Lu family was not a small family. There were dozens of god state masters in the Lu family. Just like that, they were all silently killed at home in the wee hours of the morning. How was it possible for a mere 6 bandits to do that? In order to eradicate the Lu clan, they would need at least 100 people to infiltrate the Lu clan and kill them. But she had no evidence, no evidence. The 6 bandits had also left blood letters, saying that they were dead and had taken all the blame. If this matter was handed over to the Ministry of Justice to investigate in detail, they would certainly be able to find more clues to refute the testimony of the 6 bandits. However, as the refugees flooded into the capital, a huge commotion broke out. The officials in the capital were all in danger. From top to bottom, they were all busy thinking of countermeasures to appease the common people. Who would have the time to investigate the matter of her Lu family? Moreover, who was the Lu family? Now, she was like a rat on the street that everyone wanted to beat up. Even the capital made up nursery rhymes, scolding the Lu family for taking advantage of the Empress's power and abusing the villagers. They directly scolded Empress Lu as well. Even today, during the morning court session, there were officials who took advantage of the situation and handed the great emperor a memorial to pray for the people to abolish the Empress. Empress Lu's eyes were red, and she said harshly, "Go and summon all my secret guards." Greetings, Your Majesty. Chapter 3999. Go investigate clearly what that punk Prince Qin did these past few days. Empress Lu widened her bloodshot eyes and screamed malevolently like a malicious spirit. Lonely Mountain's Imperial Mausoleum Duanyu, who was guarding the thatched cottage and accompanying his mother on Lonely Mountain, was dressed in white. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and his figure was visibly thinner than a month ago. A shadowy figure followed behind him like a shadow. Duanyu took 2 steps forward and sprayed water with a flower pot. Then, he quickly followed suit. Whenever Duanyu took 2 steps to the side, he would also take 2 steps to the side. He followed closely behind Duanyu. Duanyu was a bit annoyed from following, so he tossed the flower pot aside and turned to look at him. Stay 3 feet away from me. Hidden Guard shook his head vigorously. Your Highness, you fainted in the inner courtyard 3 days ago. Leader ordered me to stay within 3 steps of you from now on. Duanyu rubbed his forehead and explained patiently, that was an accident. He really wasn't that weak. It was just that day when he recalled that day's incident, Duanyu's lips couldn't help but sneer. That old man wanted to take over his body while he was feeling down. How could a sparrow occupying a dove's nest be so beautiful? He thought that he blamed himself for being indecisive in the past, which caused the people around him to suffer so much. If he had been ruthless to that woman and killed her from the start, his mother wouldn't have died, and he wouldn't be all alone. So, kindness and whatnot were sometimes unnecessary. It would cause the death of the people closest to you. So that day, when the old man threatened him again, he smiled and started roasting him with silver-white flames. He didn't care that he might be his ancestor, his great-grandfather, someone he had to respect. He only knew that the power of the Devil Emperor was his now. Since he inherited the bloodline of the Devil Emperor, then he had to integrate it into his body and truly transform it into something that belonged to him and could be used by him. So, there was no need for an old man like you to exist anymore. He roasted that old man, but because they were connected by blood, he also suffered greatly. That was why he suddenly fainted in the inner courtyard. He really poked a hornet's nest this time. Little Ku Zi, Yuanjin, and the others all thought that he had fainted again due to excessive grief. The secret guards also anxiously followed behind him, not willing to leave him alone. How troublesome. That old man was only half roasted and had not completely melted yet, Your Highness. Dr. Tu, who had hurried over, bowed respectfully to His Highness from afar. She knew that His Highness didn't like people getting too close to him, so she stood far away. There's news. Although he lived on a lonely mountain and spent every day with his mother, he still sent out many spies. He knew very well that Jojo and Nemo Lien had returned to the royal school, but he did not know the details. The heavenly elixir store in the divine land has sent a letter. There should be a result. Dr. Tu lowered his eyes and passed the letter to the shadow guard. After receiving it, Ing presented it to Duan Yu. Duan Yu first read what was written on that letter. The poison analysis was detailed and meticulous, so even a layman could understand it at a glance. Then, he poured out a small ring from the envelope. A small white paper floated out, and there was only a line of small words on it. Duan Yu, take good care of yourself. There was no signature, but he knew who it was. He picked up the small silver spatial ring and took a deep look at it in the direction of the sunlight. Chapter 4000. So bright. It was as if that beam of sunlight had passed through that tiny ring and directly shot into his heart. The pressing warmth seemed to be able to instantly disperse much of the haze and poisonous miasma. Lonely Mountain was cold all around, but he couldn't feel much coldness right now. Duan Yu gripped that ring with an indifferent expression. Physician Tu eagerly gazed at Duan Yu from afar with a curious and frenzied expression. Master. Give me a definite answer. Duan Yu put away the ring and the small white letter into his sleeve before handing the antidote letter to Ing. Ing returned the letter to Physician Tuesday. Physician Tu quickly skimmed through the letter. After he finished reading, his eyes lit up as he looked at Duan Yu. He couldn't help but sigh. Amazing. You really could tell. Soul-devouring flowers couldn't be considered a poison at all. Some female cultivators even specially used them to concoct perfume. This was because the perfume concocted from the soul-devouring flower was very refreshing and pleasant. Furthermore, it had no side effects on cultivators' bodies. However, just as the letter said, the other party very shrewdly found such a common yet very useful item and specially used it to deal with Her Highness Noble Consort Duan, who was a normal person. It didn't matter how rare or precious the item was. It only mattered that it was useful to a mortal woman. If it weren't for the fact that the pill refiner had a profound understanding of pharmacology and was very proficient in all kinds of medicinal herbs in the world, who would associate it with such a common soul-devouring flower in such a short time? Physician Tu carefully folded the letter and put it into an envelope before respectfully presenting it with both hands. Duan Yu also put the letter into his sleeve before looking at the silent woman standing on the side. Is there anything else? Physician Tu said with a conflicted expression, Master, this subordinate wants to go to the Divine Province's Heavenly Pill Hall to study for a month. In order to stay by Master's side in the future and be able to take better care of him, Tu Xiuxiu felt that her decision was definitely correct. Otherwise, with her current half-baked ability, she might not be able to take care of Master if someone else extended a vicious hand to him. An extremely faint smile appeared on Duan Yu's lips. Go if you want. I'll write a letter for you to bring over. Yes. Tu Xiuxiu nodded solemnly. She cupped her fists and bowed. Thank you for your tolerance, Master. Lil Ku Zi and Aunt Yuanjin ran over in small, quick steps. After bowing, Xiao Ku Zi panted as he said, Your Highness, the Emperor is urgently summoning you back. A cold and sharp glint flashed through Duan Yu's eyes. He didn't say anything and just nodded his head. Seeing little Aziz staring at him blankly, he could not help but say helplessly, "Go and pack your luggage. We're going down the mountain this afternoon." Xiao Aziz instantly cried tears of joy. He looked at Duan Yu and stammered, Your Highness, is this true? You really must be willing to go down the mountain." All right, this servant will go and prepare." He couldn't be blamed for being stupid, but His Highness was too stubborn. During this period of time, it was unknown how many people had tried to persuade His Highness to leave the mountain. Even left Prime Minister Wu Yong had come to see him once at night. However, he was still unable to persuade His Highness to change his mind. A storm was brewing in the royal court. Due to His Majesty's illness, the second prince and third prince were in a state of chaos. On the other hand, that crown prince appeared to be very calm and never fought with anyone. He hid in the Eastern Palace every day to walk the birds and play with the dogs, living a more carefree life than anyone else. Chapter 4001. She really couldn't figure out what was going on. She kept feeling that His Highness the Crown Prince, Rongli, seemed to have suddenly changed his personality. He didn't even fight with the second prince and third prince recently. It seemed like he was cultivating his character. Wasn't this a joke? Your Highness. A black figure flitted across the sky and landed beside Ing. Ing immediately bowed respectfully in greeting. This was the captain of their hidden guards, Yi. He was the leader of the entire hidden guards, and he was also the one who usually dispatched all the hidden guards outside. Now that he suddenly appeared here, he must have something urgent to report to His Highness. Ing retreated a few more steps and sent a look to Yuan Zhen and Xiao Kezi, telling them to retreat as well. The leader of the hidden guards, Yi, took 2 steps forward and whispered to Duan Yu, Her Majesty the Empress sent a group of hidden guards to investigate the movements of the people around you. We have also been targeted. Duan Yu's lips turned up in a sneer. Then let them investigate. In any case, none of the people around him had moved recently, so what clues could they find? The ones who made the move were all the men that Prince Mo arranged in secret. But speaking of which, this punk he actually left so many hidden guards in Phoenix Emperor City. He was truly wicked, immoral. These hidden guards were originally left in case of an emergency. They were most likely used to deal with his emperor father, Rong Yuan. To think that Prince Mo actually had such great patience. Who knew how many years he had been plotting? So the number of men he left in Phoenix Emperor City was really quite a lot. Duan Yu couldn't help but shake his head at this thought. Whoever made an enemy out of Mo Lien would truly have 8 lifetimes of bad luck because this guy was too black-hearted and too scary. If you accidentally offended him, who knew how many traps he would set around you, just waiting for you to foolishly walk right into his trap. It was indeed time to meet that old woman. Duan Yu's lips curled up in a cold smile. That afternoon, all the aristocratic families and officials in Song Prefecture's Phoenix Emperor City received the news His Highness Prince Qin had returned to the palace. Mai Qiao's section break. When Mo Lien pushed open the door and entered, she saw her wife drooping on the bed with her eyes half closed. Who knew what she was thinking about? From the looks of it, it was as if he had fallen asleep in the middle of his cultivation and was hanging by the side of the bed. Was that what he was thinking? Although his little wife's cultivation was impermanent, she probably wouldn't do such a strange thing, right? His footsteps were light, but he suddenly stopped and looked at the little guy with a strange expression. At this moment, he was absolutely certain that his wife had fallen asleep. He could even hear the sound of her even breathing. This wasn't even a light sleep. He was half hanging by the side of the bed, in a strange position. He was sound asleep. Wife, you're really capable. She had never seen a cultivator fall asleep while cultivating. The corners of Mo Lien's mouth twitched. He quickened his steps and floated to his baby's side. He half squatted in front of her and looked at her sleeping expressionlessly with her head lowered. Pooh. Mo Lien turned his head and glared at the guy who laughed at his wife. Shi Qin blinked and poured himself a cup of cold tea. As he drank, he shook his head and said, "This is this noble one's first time seeing someone fall asleep while cultivating in seclusion, what do you know?" Mo Lien reflexively retorted, "Look at my Jojo, even though he's asleep." Chapter 4002. But the divine power surrounding her is still absorbing the divine power of heaven and earth. Don't you see the divine power surrounding her? It was only at this point that Mo Lien suddenly realized what he had said, and he immediately lowered his head to size up his wife again. Ma Shiqin also stopped laughing and carefully looked at his Joe from head to toe. Then, he exclaimed, "You're right. She really is. Holy shit." Judging from the level of divine power in his body, Charles' cultivation speed in his sleep was actually not much slower than his normal cultivation speed. In fact, it could even be said that it was even faster than his normal cultivation speed. Hu Shiqin did not even notice when the teacup in his hand rolled onto the table and the tea spilled all over the table. He only looked at his Jojo carefully, as if he was looking at a god. His mouth opened and closed several times, but he could not say anything normal. She was too freaking weird, okay? Cultivation required one to use one's own divine consciousness to communicate with the divine power of heaven and earth and absorb it. Who else could continue to absorb divine power as if their body was breathing freely after they fell asleep? I've never seen Jojo being so amazing before. Mo Lien explained expressionlessly, "I'm afraid it's a new skill that was unlocked after she advanced to the godly state." Hu Shiqin looked at him silently and suddenly felt that Mo Lien's words made a lot of sense. For a moment, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal did not know how to answer or refute. He just stood there in a daze. Qiao Mu yawned and opened her confused eyes. She raised her small head slightly, and when she saw the Crown Prince's strange expression, she reflexively flicked her eyebrows. Why did you come back so early today?" She suddenly realized that she was hanging by the bed and her little face stiffened. Then, she immediately straightened her posture and continued to sit cross-legged. Only then did she realize that besides Mo Lien, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was also sitting at the table and looking at her with a confused expression. Both of their expressions were a little weird. The little fellow muttered in her heart. She put on a serious face and said to the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal who was looking at her, "What are you doing? Don't disturb my cultivation." If the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal had tea in his mouth, he would have choked on it. Fortunately, he had the foresight and could not help but laugh strangely. "Jojo, your cultivation method is quite unique." Mo Lien pursed her lips and poked her little head with her finger. She coughed softly and said, "Baby, you fell asleep just now." Sir Jojo glanced at him and quickly denied it. "Impossible. What kind of joke was this? How could she, Master Jojo, fall asleep while cultivating? If word got out, wouldn't it make people laugh their heads off?" Mo Lien and Ma Shiqin looked at each other and exchanged a helpless look at the same time. "See, this is the little fellow's usual style, die, beat, a duck, die, won't admit to it." Mo Lien raised her hand and patted her on the head. "Jojo, we just realized that you can automatically draw on the god power of heaven and earth after you fall asleep and absorb it endlessly into your body." Sir Jojo looked up at her husband. "Speak human language. You're still cultivating after you fall asleep." Looking at the two men who spoke in unison, Arbor laughed at them expressionlessly. Then, he jumped off the bed and walked out. "I'm cultivating." He did not sleep. Chapter 4003. Outside the door, they could still hear the two people's unbridled and bold laughter. Sir Jojo turned to glare at the door, then snorted and turned to walk towards the small kitchen. Since he had nothing to do, Sir Jojo cooked a sumptuous lunch for them. When the head chefs and junior royal maids who were busy in the small kitchen saw that the young Crown Prince Consort had come over from afar, their faces immediately showed very interesting expressions. Why is the Crown Princess coming towards the small kitchen? The Crown Princess couldn't be thinking of personally cooking something for the Crown Prince again, right? Don't, dear. The last time you personally cooked a bowl of black soup, they couldn't bear to look at it, but His Highness actually really drank it. The moment the little Crown Princess walked into the small kitchen, she immediately found that the surrounding sounds had disappeared. Even the sound of the chefs chopping vegetables had disappeared. She expressionlessly dug around in her inner world and took out a lot of ingredients: clear streams, spirit bamboo shoots, colorful divine fish, and various kinds of poultry that had been bred in Paradise Planet for a long time. In a moment, the entire quiet kitchen was completely filled with the sound of chickens flying and ducks jumping. When Kai Xiu received the news, she hastily rushed over and put on a colorful smile. She couldn't help but console her in a soft voice. "Crown Prince Consort, let's leave the ingredients here and let head chef Wang and the others cook." Yes, Crown Princess can just tell us what she wants to eat. No matter if it's steamed, boiled, fried, anything is fine. Everyone in the small kitchen nodded in unison. "I beg you, little Crown Princess, don't waste our poor Crown Prince anymore." Looking at His Highness' pitiful appearance, they all felt their hearts ache. Xiao Mu expressionlessly glanced at them. As she followed Sai Xiu outside, she asked coldly, "Do they dislike me?" "No. Absolutely not." Kai Xiu's little face was about to stiffen from smiling. Turning her head, she sincerely blinked at the Crown Princess. "They are all afraid that the Crown Princess is too tired." "Humph. Don't think that this Crown Princess is stupid and can't see the fear in their eyes. The Crown Princess was not an assassin, so why were they so afraid of her? I heard that virtuous women have to wash their hands and cook for their husbands." The corner of Kai Xiu's mouth twitched. She quickly smiled and said, "Crown Princess, you are already virtuous enough. Besides, didn't we already make soup last time?" Everyone in the small kitchen didn't want to recall the process of making soup. What a pity for their peerless and elegant Crown Prince. In the face of the bowl of special soup that his wife had brought over, he was actually able to drink it without any change in expression or heart rate, as expected of the Crown Prince, who would remain calm even if Mdtai collapsed in front of him. They were the strongest warriors of the divine land. He was their future king at that time. The jaws of all the eunuchs and palace maids inside and outside the small kitchen had probably dropped to the ground when head chef Wang and the rest saw the little Crown Princess in the future. They would all have a trace of psychological trauma. Arbor touched his fingers embarrassedly. "Isn't that a failure?" She wasn't a fool. How could she not know that that black bowl of soup was a failure? How could there be a Lingji nourishing soup that turned into a black sesame seed? It must be that the recipe was wrong. She wasn't a chef in the past. Without training, how could she make a good soup? Chapter 4004. The corners of Kai Xiu's mouth twitched. With great difficulty and a strange expression, she tried her best to dispel her little master's strange idea. "Crown Prince Consort, the Lingji mushroom soup we made last time was definitely very effective. Although it doesn't look good on the surface, it's actually very effective. That bowl of Lingji soup made His Royal Highness so hungry that he didn't want to eat for 3 days. She felt that His Royal Highness was incomparably unlucky. His Royal Highness can't eat such good soup often. Didn't you hear the old saying? It's too weak to make up for it. Crown Prince is weak." Arbor looked stunned. No, it's too weak to make up for it, right? Kai Xiu tried her best to make up for the meaning in her words. Seeing the little crown princess frowning, she suddenly forced herself to change the topic. By the way, I heard that the city is very lively tonight. It said that the biggest spring house in the city is going to hold a spring party tonight. Kai Xiu couldn't help but cry silently after she finished speaking. Why did he have to rub his nose in it? His Royal Highness seemed to have warned them before that they were not allowed to mention the word spring house in front of the little crown princess. Sure enough, when the little crown princess heard this, her eyes couldn't help but light up slightly. That idiot Mu Dongni also mentioned it yesterday. Kai Xiu silently shed tears and forced a smile. Actually, there's nothing to see. It's just a few gorgeously dressed men dancing and singing songs or something like that. The little palace maids passing by were speechless. Sister Kai Xiu's words aroused the little crown princess' curiosity. Okay. By the way, crown princess, aren't you going to cultivate? I won't delay you. This servant will send you back to your room. Arbor nodded expressionlessly and suddenly asked, Did you come to my room in the afternoon? I did. What was I doing? You were cultivating. Kai Xiu's mouth twitched and suddenly said loudly, You were very serious. Arbor nodded and continued to walk forward expressionlessly with a pair of small hands behind her back. That's right, how could she cultivate until she fell asleep? She had always been cultivating seriously. Not long after dinner, the crown prince was urgently summoned to the study by the emperor. The little crown princess had nothing to do, so she sat on a small table and flipped through a book. Suddenly, she tossed the book aside and rolled her eyes. She ran to the cupboard at the side of the bedroom and rummaged through it to find a set of royal blue clothes. She put it on and tried it on. It fit her small body perfectly. This should be Mo Lian's clothes from when she was young. She tucked the sleeves inside and it would fit her just right. After changing her clothes, the little fellow tied her hair into a ponytail and found a small jade crown to fix her hair. Then he slipped out of the Eastern Palace like a wisp of smoke. Before doing all this, the little guy still had a guilty conscience and secretly blocked the star field. However, as soon as she moved, the shadows of several hidden guards followed her. After Sir Jojo left the Eastern Palace, he summoned the heavenly horsetail feather and jumped on it to stroll out of the palace. Mo Lian was still in the emperor's study, discussing the zombie outbreak in the outskirts of Li City with him. Suddenly, he received a distress message from Aoyi. Save me, your highness, the crown princess ran away. That bastard fool. Mo Lian's mouth twitched. He elegantly closed the file with one hand and waved at his imperial father. My wife asked me to go back. We'll talk again tomorrow morning. Chapter 4005. Ignoring Mo Liuxing's furious glare at her back, Mo Lian left the imperial study and summoned Aoyi. Where did the crown princess go? Aoyi glanced at him pitifully and hastily said, Grand Crown Princess, she should have gone to Spring House to participate in the Spring Festival. Mo Lian. I already told you not to mention this damn Spring Festival in front of your wife. His wife was young and couldn't be tempted. She was born with a strong sense of curiosity and couldn't help but join in the fun whenever she encountered something fun. What was he supposed to do? Your Highness, should we mobilize the Emperor's shadow guards to capture the Crown Princess? Aoyi immediately asked. Prince Mo leisurely glanced at him and coolly asked, When this Crown Prince is punished by my wife to kneel, will you take her place? Aoyi immediately adjusted his expression and shook his head vigorously. No need, Your Highness. It's better for you to bear the Crown Princess's love for you alone. Heh, looks like this punk Mrs. Huifeng. Aoyi replied seriously, Your Highness, then what should we do? Prince Mo gave him a chilly smile and grumpily roared, "So useless, you can't even stop the crown princess." What else could he do? Of course, he had to leave the palace to find his wife. Aoye glanced at his master pitifully and quietly muttered, "Who dares to stop the little crown princess?" "What are you saying?" This subordinate didn't say anything. Aoye turned his head and silently shed tears. What could he do when he met an unreasonable master? He could only silently accept his fate. Arbor strolled out of the Eastern Palace alone and vigilantly glanced back. "Humph. Do you think I wouldn't know that a few shadow guards are following this lord sneakily?" The little fellow took out a small golden fan and opened it with a snap. He fanned himself twice and then frowned. It was such a hot day, yet he was fanning himself while walking. He really looked like an idiot. There was no wind at all. She really didn't know why there were so many men who liked to fan themselves all day long. For example, eldest young Master Qin. The little girl threw away her fan and ran towards the southern part of the city like a wisp of smoke. Spring Full House was opened in South City. It was said that it had only been operating for less than half a month, but the degree of its business was already catching up to the veteran pink houses. This brothel was probably a little strange. How could a small brothel open from the lower star field to the upper three continents? This was simply unheard of. She had to personally investigate this matter and find out what was going on. Young master, quickly, come in. Today, our Apricot Blossom Brothel has a special discount. The ladies in the brothel are all gorgeously dressed and beautiful. No matter what style you want, we have it. Before the little crown princess could walk up the steps of the spring-filled house, she was stopped by a madam who was wearing red and green makeup and had pearls all over her head. The little girl couldn't help but take 3 steps back when she saw the madam's yellow-toothed grin. In the blink of an eye, a figure flew down from the front of the spring-filled house and blocked the madam's path. "Maruichuan, why did you come to our spring-filled house to solicit business? This little brother is obviously here for our spring-filled house." "Bah!" Maruichuan glared at the red-clothed man as if she was looking at a coquettish slut. She reached out to grab Arbor. "Little brother, don't be blinded by these demons and monsters. They're not good people." Chapter 4006. The price of this spring room isn't cheap, but the service in the room simply can't keep up. That's to deceive you young customers who don't know how to appreciate the market price. Don't fall for it, little brother. The man in red raised his hand and blocked in front of Madame Chun. He chuckled and said, "Madame Chun, don't meddle. Be careful, you'll get beaten." As he spoke, the man waved his hand. Immediately, more than a dozen burly men rushed out of the spring-filled house and surrounded Mother Chun, who was swallowing her saliva. You want to force a sale?" Madame Chun yelled in exasperation. Afterwards, she was forcibly dragged away from the entrance of the spring room by the dozen or so burly men with fierce-looking faces. The man in red swept her a glance, and just as he was about to tug on the little stoic's sleeve, she brushed him aside and threw him aside in disdain. The man in red glanced at her aggrievedly with a pitiful expression. "Little stoic, in any case, we've met twice before. Don't keep people at arm's length." The stoic face expressionlessly lowered her head to look at her small hand and subconsciously touched her small face. Strange, people could still recognize her at a glance even though she was dressed in men's clothing. It wasn't like Mo Lien and Duan Yu were familiar with her and could recognize her at a glance. Why did this man in red also recognize her at a glance? "Red, what are you dawdling outside for?" A blue figure floated over, and when his gaze landed on Arbor, his eyes suddenly brightened. "The little stoic is here." Arbor. Could it be that his face was so recognizable? After rolling his eyes at the two people, Sir Jojo immediately walked toward the entrance of the spring room without a word. 5 of the 7 flowers were currently standing at the entrance and chatting with guests from all over with a grin. When they looked up and saw the little stoic, they couldn't help but size her up. The little girl specially changed into men's clothing today. She probably purposely changed into men's clothing because she was afraid of being recognized. She tied her long ponytail with a jade crown and swayed behind her head. She had an expressionless face and was extremely adorable. The 5 flowers simultaneously waved their hands at Xiao Mu, greeting her with a grin. Upon seeing this, the female guests who were chatting with them at the entrance all turned their heads to look in the little stoic's direction. When a plump middle-aged woman saw the little stoic's exquisite small face, her eyes abruptly lit up, and she asked with a dazed expression, Green E, is this little brother a newcomer to your brothel? The green-clothed young man whose hand was being held by the woman blinked pitifully and repeatedly tried to withdraw his hand that was being molested by the old woman. Madam, that little brother is a guest. The old woman suddenly understood something. Her face stiffened slightly, and she glanced at Arbor with an ugly expression. She clicked her tongue and shook her head. You're so young, but you're actually a homosexual. She brushed her nose with her handkerchief in disdain, but she still held Green Ye's small hand and dragged him inside the room. Green Yi, you must accompany Madam for a few drinks today. Madam, I'm not good at drinking. The green young sir called out pitifully, his pair of watery eyes occasionally sending pleading glances at the little stoic. The little stoic student furrowed her brows again and again. Seeing the old woman's vulgar expression as she held his small hand and refused to let go was truly an eyesore. Didn't she see that he wasn't willing to drink with her? Chapter 4007. Arbor restrained herself, but she felt that there was no need to do so. Then, she dashed forward and landed a vicious eagle hook on the woman's left eye. Seeing that plump woman howl and roll down the steps, the corners of the 7 flowers' mouths twitched in unison, and they glanced at the stoic face in exasperation. The little fellow looked back and happened to see a carriage parked at the bottom of the steps. A white, slender figure emerged from the carriage and stepped out, almost stepping on the fat woman who had bumped into the carriage wheel. The newcomer hastily retracted her foot and looked up with a dumbfounded expression. Then, she opened the small fan in her hand and almost laughed out loud. Jojo, it's truly a small world. Arbor rolled her eyes and pretended not to see eldest Chin's face that deserved a spanking. Following eldest young sir out of the carriage were 2 other young sirs who were also dressed in moon-white robes. Arbor swept a glance over them and knew that these 2 were also women dressed as men. She even recognized one of them. It was the Lin family's young miss, Lin Miao. Arbor wasn't familiar with the other woman dressed as a man, but seeing how familiar she was with Lin Miao, she guessed that she was probably a young miss from some aristocratic family. Eldest young sir waved his fan and walked up with a grin. He stretched out his hand in front of Arbor and said, Jojo, are you here to join in the fun? Let me introduce you. These 2 are the Lin family's Lin Miao, and that's the Gu family's Gu Yisin. Their carriage broke down halfway, so this young sir gave them a lift. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly, baffled. Why was this guy explaining things to her? Fan Mang and Fan Yu are starting their performance. Hurry, hurry, hurry. After a burst of lively voices, everyone surged into the building. Arbor followed the crowd and entered the door. She immediately saw Mu Dongni, who was squeezed at the edge of the stage and clinging onto it, repeatedly calling out, Meng Meng, Meng Meng. This idiot. A vein on Arbor's forehead throbbed slightly. Don't you dare fight with me for my Meng Meng. Today, even if I, Mu Dongni, have to spend 10 million spirit coins to have a long talk with my Meng Meng. Pooh. Eldest young Sir Chin's irritating voice suddenly sounded in a certain person's ear. Jojo, look at how explosive this scene is. If that jealous lover Mo Lien finds out that you came to this brothel to bid for the male courtesan Belle, tell me, how are you going to live your days? Nonsense. Mr. Jojo glared at him angrily. Which eye of yours saw me bidding? Hee hee, what a joke. The crowd was too crowded, and the little girl grew impatient. She turned around and punched a madam's waist, causing the madam in front to fall forward. Cries of alarm rang out. At the same time, Mr. Jojo turned around and kicked another woman who had squeezed her way forward. In just a few moments, he cleared, through, all the people around him out. The corners of eldest young Sir Chin's eyes twitched. He couldn't help but secretly applaud the little girl's violence. Taking advantage of the chaos, the little fellow slipped away, shaking off eldest young Sir Chin who was following her like a shadow, and ran up to the second floor. If there was something strange about this brothel, there would always be some clues left behind in the room. The little girl kicked open the door, and two panicked screams of varying lengths immediately rang out from inside. Sorry, this lord kicked the wrong door. You two can continue, ha. The little girl closed the door and turned around, reflexively dodging a sharp grab. Chapter 4008. That person's vicious claw really did have the intention of tearing the little girl apart. However, what kind of person was Arbor? How could she be torn apart by that person's claw? She stretched out her fist and pointed, and a blue spiritual flame shot towards the other party's arm. Chee! That person covered his face and retracted his arm. His 5 fingers quickly extinguished the blue spiritual flame, and then he quickly kicked open the door to the side of the room. Ah! The 2 unlucky fellows who had already been kicked in the door before were startled again. Trembling, they knelt on the bed and hugged each other in a twisted posture. With a whoosh, the masked man brushed past their bed and jumped out of the window to escape. His figure quickly disappeared into the twilight. Arbor was baffled. She lowered her head and looked at her little hand. She blinked her eyes in thought. That person was clearly aggressive and wanted to kill her at first, but why did he immediately retreat when she turned around and looked at him? Could it be that this person also recognized her? The little girl had a puzzled expression. She closed the door for the 2 unlucky people and shook her little paw. Continue. Continue, your sister. After being interrupted twice in a row, who could continue? The 2 people looked at each other in dismay and couldn't help but spit at her. Arbor knocked on the second door and leaned forward to listen. Seeing that there was no movement inside, she pushed open the door and ran in. She rummaged through the chests and cabinets. This room looked very ordinary, just like an ordinary guest room. At a glance, other than a screen and a bed, there was only a simple storage shelf in the corner with a few scattered books and trinkets. Arbor searched for a long time without finding anything, so she sneaked out of the room. She rummaged through the second floor and searched through 4 or 5 rooms in a row. Finally, she reached the innermost part of the corridor and entered an elegantly decorated room. The little girl wiped her sweat and sat down at the table. She secretly scolded the owner of this little brothel for being so crafty. She rummaged through several rooms in a row, but she didn't find anything. This was simply illogical. As far as she was concerned, this strange little inn had to be hiding something for her. Now that she thought about it carefully, it was very strange that Yi Ling Min had led her to that building that night on Seikong Planet. At that time, Yi Ling Min also said that Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord Gung Pengcheng's underground base was located under the entire red light district. But was that really Gung Pengcheng's underground base? Or was it the power behind him? Ever since she arranged for Dun Zong to stay in Shuntian Prefecture, Tian Yun's people never appeared to contact him again. This meant that Dungeon's identity must have been exposed. However, it was clear that the current Tian Yun had placed all his attention on the upper 3 continents. He would definitely not spare any time to deal with the Dun clan in the Shuntian prefecture. If they didn't have any background, who would have the leisure to open a small brothel in the upper 3 provinces? With such wealth, power, he could have done something else. Why did he have to continue to open a brothel in Shenzhou? Could it be a strange stronghold? Under the jurisdiction of the Heavenly Fate Administration, the more the little girl thought about it, the more suspicious she became. She sized up the room. There was probably a secret passage in this place, right? The little girl stood up and rummaged through the boxes and cabinets to continue searching. She knocked on the floor and the bed, trying to find some secret passage. After rummaging for a long time, she found nothing and tired herself out. A certain little person thumped her little waist and raised her head speechlessly. She propped up her chin in puzzlement and squatted by the table, thinking about something. Chapter 4009. Could it be that Sir Jojo's clever brain was mistaken? However, she had once used her divine perception to secretly investigate the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple at the door. Indeed, there was nothing in their heads, and there wasn't the slightest fluctuation of spiritual energy on their bodies. They should be mortals. It was very strange. Sir Jojo was crouching next to the table when he suddenly heard a sound coming from the door. Without thinking, he immediately stuck an invisibility talisman on himself. Bang! The door to the room abruptly slammed shut. A slightly familiar voice then came from the door, calling sweetly, "Meng Meng, aw. Am I dreaming? Wow, I'm really touching my Meng Meng." Arbor, why was Mu Dongni, this scoundrel, everywhere she went? "Madam, don't be like this. I still have to perform a song on stage later." You, Meng Meng, you can just have someone else play the song. It's rare for us to meet, so how about you accompany me for a drink or two? The invisible Sir Jojo was sitting at the small round table made of pear wood in the room, expressionlessly glaring at the woman who was practically hanging half her body on Fan Meng. Madam, pitiful Fan Meng's slender body was about to be crushed by Mu Dongni's sturdy body. What madam? That damn husband of mine died long ago, and I'm unmarried right now. Mu Dongni covered her mouth and giggled, almost causing the little stoic to have goosebumps all over her body. Fan Meng tried her best to pull away this madam's octopus-like hands, and her elegant face revealed a very troubled and pitiful expression. Madam, don't pull anymore. This fellow was wearing clothes made of extremely moist silk. After Mu Dongni, that dunce, tugged at it twice with all her might, half of her glistening and glossy skin was revealed. It really looked seductive. Mu Dongni hung on Fan Meng's body the entire way here as if she couldn't walk. This scene was simply unbearable to look at. Arbor sat there expressionlessly as he watched them walk over and squeezed to sit next to him. Mu Dongni rubbed herself against the man with an intoxicated expression and called sweetly, "Meng Lang, don't be evasive." Meng Lang, Arbor, she really had to hand it to Mu Dongni. Fan Meng had a fearful look on her face and didn't want to have any contact with her at all. Yet, this fellow kept rubbing herself against Fan Meng's body. That impatient look was simply unbearable to watch. How did the Mu clan produce such an idiot? The little stoic sat next to them with a sullen face and watched them tug at each other for a long time. Chi-la. A large part of Fan Meng's sleeve was torn off by Mu Dongni. Her beautiful face turned pale as she retreated. Mu Dongni was almost drooling. She pounced on young Master Fan Meng, wanting to push him to the ground. The little guy who was sitting on the side and watching the show couldn't take it anymore. He picked up a vase and smashed it on Mu Dongni's head. Fan Mang stared blankly at the vase that suddenly flew up and smashed into Mu Dongni's head. She looked around in horror. Mu Dongni was also stunned. Her head was covered in blood. She turned her head and stared back. Who hit me? Who is it? Arbor raised his leg and sent Mu Dongni flying out in front of him. That fellow rolled out and knocked her head against the door frame. She instantly fainted miserably. Chapter 40:10. If Fan Meng still couldn't tell that there was someone else in the room now, then she would be an idiot. He hastily tugged at his clothes that had slipped down and anxiously looked around the room. Which expert, please show yourself. The little stoic stuck an appearance talisman on herself and expressionlessly appeared in front of Fan Mang. Fan Mang immediately widened her eyes and looked at her in surprise and delight. You. The little stoic lady. Arbor rolled his eyes. How was she stoic? Ha, you're the stoic one, your whole family is stoic. Fan Mang. Hurried footsteps came from outside the door. Immediately after, the door to the room was forcefully pushed open twice before it opened a crack with great difficulty. A handsome man in plain clothes squeezed in from outside. He looked down and discovered that Mu Dongni, that fool, was blocking the door. She was lying behind the door with her hair covered in blood, making it difficult to open the room door. Fan Yu, I'm fine. Fan Mang stood up and turned to nod at her companion with a smile. Fan Yu quickly walked up and glanced at the little stoic. She suddenly laughed and said, eh. Red Coat and the others were all saying that the little stoic lady came. I thought they were lying. The little stoic looked at them expressionlessly. She looked down at her youthful attire and couldn't resist protesting. Which eye did you use to see this lord's attire? Damn. How should I address the stoic lady? Fan Yu blinked and asked. Xiao. The little stoic waved her small hand and was about to walk outside. Fan Yu suddenly reached out to block her and said with a grin, Miss Jojo, you've done our Fan Meng a great favor, so we must properly thank you. This place is unbearably filthy. How about we change to another room for you? Sir Jojo hastily waved her small hand. No need. She wasn't here to drink tea. What was she waiting for when she didn't find anything strange after rummaging through the room for so long? Of course, she should immediately stroll back to the palace and act like nothing happened. Wait, Miss Jojo. When the little stoic saw Fan Yu reach out to block her again, a hint of displeasure flitted through her eyes. She still had some impressions of these two people. When she first came to the House of Spring, the two of them had taught her a lot of things while chatting with her. Later, she even confessed to Jojo's lotus, thump, thump, thump. Hurried footsteps could be heard from the corridor outside. Accompanied by Seven Flowers' messy cries, Hey, young master, you can't just barge in. Young master. Hey, you. Arbor's heart skipped a beat. He had a bad feeling. With a bang, the door of the private room was kicked flying. Poor Mu Dongni, who was lying at the door, was smashed to the ground by the flying door. Mu Dongni, who had just woken up, fainted again after being patted like that. Xiao Mu quivered in fright and hastily shoved away Fan Yu, who was blocking in front of her. She sprinted towards the window with a whoosh and jumped down from the window with her clothes fluttering in the wind. Hey, young lady. Fan Yu pulled Fan Meng to the door and lowered her head to take a look. She saw that the young lady had already jumped onto the street on the first floor. She fled faster than a rabbit and blended into the crowd in a flash. Mo Lien chased after them and expressionlessly glanced at the little fellow who had blended into the crowd. A small, treacherous glint surfaced in her eyes. She was quite capable. She even dared to flee without a trace when she saw her husband running over. Chapter 40:11. Did she think she could escape like this? Ha ha. Truly a naive Jojo. Mo Lien pursed her lips and turned around to glare coldly at the 7 blossoms who had caught up to her. She then jumped down from the window and disappeared into the crowd in a flash. The people in the room looked at each other in bewilderment. After Arbor ran down the stairs, he naturally planned to sneak back to the Eastern Palace. This way, the little fellow would be able to deny that he had left just now. Humph, it wasn't like he was caught by hubby. After Sir Jojo made up his mind, he flipped out his heavenly horsetail feather and jumped on it. He leisurely floated up into the sky and flew towards the Eastern Palace. It was already late at night. Other than the bustling red lights in Spring Full House and the hubbub of voices, the dark streets were basically empty. The heavenly horsetail feather's flying speed could be fast or slow at will. Sir Jojo was anxious to return home, so he naturally made it fly as fast as possible. Just as he flew to the palace gates, he saw the resplendent palace lanterns in the distance, illuminating them with a magnificent light. Sir Jojo didn't care at first. In any case, no one dared to stop her when she left the palace. Who dared to stop her now that she was back? However, when the heavenly horsetail feather flew closer and saw the slender figure standing silently on top of the palace tower that was several dozen meters tall, it was already too late to run away. She hastily turned the heavenly horsetail feather around, wanting to slip away unexpectedly. A suction force came from the sky and directly pulled her back along with the trembling feather. Swish! The little fellow was expressionlessly pulled back. Her eyes darted around rapidly, and she was carried into someone's arms without any explanation. The little crown princess obediently stayed still and blinked. She turned around to look at her husband, who was smiling at her with his head lowered. Hubby, someone attacked me just now. Oh. Then wife, did you clearly see who attacked you? The little stoic shook her head repeatedly. He was masked and ran off without a trace. I suspect that this person is very strange. Mo Lien nodded and looked at her with a smile. She gently touched her little face with her finger. Jojo. Sir Jojo looked at him with a serious expression, but his heart felt inexplicably weak. Her husband's refreshing appearance was simply too abnormal. If he had yelled at her in exasperation, she would still have some confidence in her heart. But now that he was acting like this strange, really strange. Jojo, does this dress fit you? Mo Lien smiled and tugged at her sleeve. The sleeves are very long. Arbor hurriedly reached out and hugged his neck. He closed his eyes and snuggled into his embrace. Husband, it's very late. I want to sleep. Hearing her husband's low chuckle, Jojo couldn't help but feel that no matter how she heard it, it was terrifying. My wife seems to have too much energy. Mo Lien curled his lips and floated down the palace tower with his wife in his arms. He strolled leisurely toward the Eastern Palace. Behind them were rows of guards who acted as a backdrop. Everyone looked down and did not say anything that was inappropriate. Nothing happened tonight, haha. His Highness the Crown Prince didn't stand on the city gate tower waiting to be caught and run out of the palace. No, the little Crown Princess didn't run at all. They saw what they shouldn't have seen and knew what they shouldn't know. Would they be silenced by His Highness in a fit of rage later? Arbor originally wanted to pretend to sleep, but who knew she really fell asleep? When she woke up, it was already late in the morning. She moved her small arms and legs, and her face immediately turned bitter. Chapter 40:12. I see that my wife seems to have excess energy. Stinky Lotus's words were still echoing in her ears. She had become like this today. The little fellow moved her uncomfortable little body and slowly moved to the ground with a bitter face. How could this person be so vile? Didn't he just sneak out for a stroll? He actually tormented her for an entire night. She remembered that she was tormented awake in the middle of the night, groggy and half awake. She didn't know what kind of medicine this bad guy blew on her, but now her whole body felt uncomfortable. Her small hands and feet were also somewhat weak, infuriating. She vowed not to beg for mercy, and even more so, she couldn't be weak. The little crown princess moved to the ground and immediately made an "io" sound. She put her hands on her waist and frowned pitifully. "Crown princess, you're awake." Kai Chi and Kai Xiu were holding toiletries, clothes, shoes and socks as they walked in with a smile, looking at her with pursed lips. Arbor was expressionless as he sat upright on the edge of the bed. He stretched out a pair of small paws and said, "Change clothes." Kai Xiu was overjoyed. The crown princess usually didn't need their help. Now that she suddenly had a mischievous look, it was really fun to look at. After helping the little crown princess change clothes and wash up, Kai Xiu pursed her lips and said with a smile, "Crown princess, His Highness just brought a lot of books from the Imperial Hospital for you. You'll have books to read during this period of time. His Highness wants you to read books after breakfast. He'll be back in the afternoon." Jojo scolded him 3 times in a row. Looking at the servants bringing in boxes of books, there was no change in her expression, but her heart was a little broken. Jojo's lotus was really too vile. He actually found so many books for her and urged her to stay at home to read and not go out for a stroll. Humph. The little girl expressionlessly held a small spoon and sent a mouthful of bird's nest porridge into her mouth. She glanced at Kai Xiu standing at the side. "I want to go home," the little girl said expressionlessly. Kai Xiu pursed her lips and nodded. His Highness said that he'll be back in the afternoon to accompany the crown princess back. Humph. The little crown princess was a little angry. She took a look at the time and realized that it was almost noon. Thus, he asked, "Didn't you say you'd be back at noon? Where is he?" Kai Chi covered her mouth and laughed. "Crown princess, perhaps His Highness was delayed by a small matter. Could it be that the crown prince consort is hungry again after having breakfast?" The little crown princess rolled her eyes. While they were talking, Kai Chi hurriedly ran in from outside the door. She bowed and said, "Reporting to the crown princess, Empress Dowager Qin sent someone to pass on a message. Lunch will be served at Nanjing Court in the Imperial Garden. Please invite the crown princess over." Kai Xiu straightened her face and slightly frowned. The little crown princess, however, had already pulled a long face in displeasure. Who knew what this old lady was up to? Ever since the incident with old Madame Chow, Arbor no longer had any patience for this kind of old fogey who took advantage of her seniority. "Go and reply to the person who passed on the message. Just say that this crown princess is not feeling well and will not be attending." "Hey, Mama, you can't barge in." "Barge in, eh? I don't know where the crown princess is feeling unwell. This old servant can ask the Empress Dowager to send a doctor from the Imperial Hospital to come and treat the crown princess." A rude and unreasonable voice cut in. It pushed aside the few palace maids and eunuchs who were blocking it, and directly led a group of valiant women to barge in. Chapter 40:13. The old woman in front of her had a fierce-looking face and didn't look like one of the palace's old nannies. Instead, she looked a bit like a hired thug. As for the 7 to 8 sturdy nannies behind her, each of them were also tall and sturdy. They were the type that could hang 2 little royal maids up with a single punch. Arbor stared at them with a dark expression. She raised her hand slightly and had several maidservants, who tried their best to stop the nannies but couldn't, retreat to the side. "This crown princess doesn't feel well anywhere," Arbor coldly stated, go to the Imperial Hospital and invite a physician over first. The old woman in the lead was slightly startled, most likely not expecting that the little crown princess, whose lies she had exposed, could still calmly continue her previous words. She crossed her arms with a disdainful expression. This old servant sees that the crown princess' complexion is rosy and her spirit is quite good. She doesn't look like she's sick anywhere. The crown princess couldn't have purposely rejected Her Majesty the Empress Dowager's invitation and pretended to be sick, right? Arbor looked at her coldly and indifferently muttered, "Li Yi." Li Yi abruptly scuttled in through the window and stood behind the little crown princess, expressionlessly saying, "Crown princess. Go teach her a lesson." The little crown princess expressionlessly spoke with a frosty expression on her delicate, stoic face. "Yes." Li Yi cupped her fists and quickly walked up. She swung her arm twice and suddenly slapped that old woman's face. The old woman saw her walking over aggressively and already had a bad feeling in her heart. Now that she really swung her arm to slap her, she instantly shouted in exasperation, "You little wench, you dare." "I-oh." Before she could finish her nonsense, a large slap landed on her face. That old woman was indeed fierce-looking and had boundless strength, but that was only in front of several delicate palace maids. When she encountered a spiritual realm expert like Li Yi, she didn't have the slightest bit of strength to retaliate. A slap immediately landed on her face, and her face was immediately slapped crooked. "Zhao Mama." The old nannies behind her felt their hearts beating wildly. They looked at the expressionless crown princess in shock. The young crown prince consort was really going to attack them without a second word. If she still had the Empress Dowager in her heart, she would not have acted so ruthlessly and mercilessly to them. It was obvious that he didn't put Empress Dowager Qin in his eyes at all. The fierce-looking old woman, Granny Zhao, was so angry that her whole body trembled. She was an old granny by the Empress Dowager's side. Usually, she was in charge of the affairs of the outer court. With a strong body, who dared to make trouble for her? In all these years, she had never been wronged like this in the palace. How could she be slapped by a little maid serving the crown princess? This was intolerable. "What are you all still standing there for?" Granny Zhao snapped, "Suppress this little bitch for me. I'll kill her today." "Who does Granny Zhao want to kill?" A bone-chilling voice suddenly sounded from the doorway. Granny Zhao and the others turned around in shock and hurriedly knelt down in greeting. "Greetings to Your Highness the Crown Prince." "Greetings to Your Highness the Crown Prince." Mo Lian's handsome face was cold as he slowly walked in with his hands behind his back. Seeing the mess on the floor, he couldn't help but frown. "Who allowed you old shrews to barge into the bedchamber? What big guts!" Granny Zhao and the others trembled as they secretly complained incessantly in their hearts. Chapter 40:14. Why did this master return so quickly? Could it be that he didn't encounter Miss Qin along the way? Granny Zhao complained in her heart, secretly cursing that Miss Qin for being incompetent. She couldn't even delay a man. This really wasn't going to be easy to clean up. Granny Zhao hurriedly smiled apologetically, "It was us servants who overstepped our bounds. We servants deserve to die 10,000 deaths. We shouldn't have impatiently barged into the bedchamber. We servants will leave now. You do deserve to die." Prince Mo coldly cut her off and nodded with an indifferent expression, "Come." Several guards had been waiting outside for a long time, but they had always been well trained. Without the male and female master's summons, they naturally wouldn't take a single step into the inner hall. When they heard His Highness calling for them, they immediately swarmed in and called out in unison, "Your Highness. Drag them all out and execute them." Prince Mo coldly said, without the slightest fluctuation in his expression. Granny Zhao and the others' expressions abruptly changed. They abruptly raised their heads and looked in horror at the Crown Prince's grim expression. His Highness the Crown Prince actually ordered them to be executed. How could this be? His Highness really didn't give them any face at all, these old people by the Empress Dowager's side. Granny Zhao trembled. When she saw the guards come forward to drag them away, she hurriedly cried out, "Your Highness, spare us, Your Highness. We servants are under the Empress Dowager's orders to specially invite the Crown Princess Wu." Woo. The rest of her words were clearly blocked by the guards and she couldn't say anything else. Soon, the sound of bamboo slamming could be heard from outside the bedchamber. The efficiency of the Crown Prince's subordinates naturally didn't need to be mentioned. The little girl blinked and snorted at the man strolling over. She turned her little head to the side, not looking at this guy. Mo Lian walked to the little girl's side. Just as she was about to reach out to hug her, she saw the little thing jump off the couch and waved her little hand with an unhappy expression. "Your family is too annoying, I'm going home now." Mo Lian's hand paused in midair. She hurriedly flashed and blocked her path. She raised her hand and pulled her into her embrace. "Want to run again?" "Who ran away?" The little guy waved his little hand, and his little eyes glanced at him strangely. "I'll come back when your old lady stops." "She'll stop soon. Killing those people and then sending them back." Presumably, with his bloody methods, no one would dare to cause trouble in the Eastern Palace for at least a month. "I also find it annoying, my wife." Mo Lian nuzzled her head. "How about hubby accompany you home?" Arbor rolled his eyes at him and said calmly in a strange tone, "You've been following me to my mother's house all day, so your old lady must have something to say. Just wait and see. She won't stop today." Mo Lian raised his eyebrows and rubbed against his wife. "She's so annoying." Xiao Mu chuckled in response, and it was more than just a little annoying. Because of what had happened to Chen Baojia, old Madame Yi had been very displeased with her. Now that the Crown Prince had killed several of her capable nannies and thrown them back, who knew how much of a fuss she was going to make? Just wait and see. She'll be annoyed. Sure enough, in less than 2 hours, the young couple received the news that the emperor had summoned them. They looked at each other. The little fellow was so angry that she rolled her eyes at her husband. She was still angry about yesterday's torment. She wasn't feeling well today, and he was still causing trouble for her all day long. Chapter 40:15. Wife. Mo Lian pulled her small hand and winked at her with a grin. "Don't be angry, hubby will deal with them." Sir Jojo cast him a sidelong glance. "So you're saying that you have a countermeasure?" Mo Lian nodded solemnly with a cheated expression. "Mother's illness is more or less healed, so it's time for her to come out and walk around more. Let's go pick up Mother first before going to see Royal Father." Arbor couldn't help but twitch his mouth. When he thought of the pitiful emperor, he couldn't help but silently light a candle for him in his heart. "You raised such a cheated son, do you know what's going on?" "Wife, what's with that look?" Mo Lian poked her small face with a smile and lowered his head to whisper in her ear, "Don't be angry with hubby anymore, all right? Hubby will definitely handle this matter properly." He stole a kiss and winked at her with a grin. Sir Jojo cast him an irritated glance. If it weren't for this guy tormenting her until she was completely exhausted, how could she have rejected elderly lady's invitation right off the bat? If she had some energy, she would have played with elderly lady. It wasn't like she was afraid of her. The young couple sat in the carriage and strolled to the emperor's zenith palace. They weren't in a hurry to see the emperor, so they ran to see their mother first. When the empress heard that her son and daughter had come, she was very happy. Her originally pale cheeks were now flushed with warmth. When Prince Mo saw his mother, he aggrievedly grabbed his wife's small hand and ran over. As soon as they met, he complained to Her Majesty the Empress, "Mother, your son's wife is about to be bullied to death." This cheated crown prince blabbered on and on about how the Queen Dowager allowed a wicked servant to trespass into the Eastern Palace's bedchamber and even spoke nonsense to her own daughter-in-law and refused to be disciplined. After he ordered someone to beat her to death in a fit of rage, the Queen Dowager wanted to make trouble for them and so on. Regardless of whether it was right or wrong, complain first. The little stoic expressionlessly sat on the small stool in front of the Empress and obediently placed her two small hands on her knees. Her pitiful appearance immediately entered the hearts of everyone in the Empress's palace. The Empress glanced at her silent daughter-in-law and was immediately filled with righteous indignation. These wicked servants are really bold. The maids and palace maids around the Empress were the confidants of the Emperor and the Empress. These past few years, she didn't leave her residence and stayed in the underground ice palace to take care of Her Majesty, so she didn't know much about the little stoic, this crown princess. After hearing the crown prince's description, they all secretly sympathized with the little crown princess. She was so young and didn't have any background in the imperial city. She was bullied by the old madam every day. How pitiful. Come with me to see your father. The Empress was furious. He got up and ordered the servants to change their clothes. He planned to accompany his son and daughter-in-law to the imperial study to have a good talk with the great emperor. "Mother," Prince Mo said aggrievedly, "a few days ago, Jojo needed a relatively quiet environment in order to make the soul-returning pill for Mother. The palace was too noisy, so we moved to Jojo's maiden home for a while." However, the old madam bore a grudge against Jojo. A certain little person obediently sat on the small stool without uttering a word. The Empress pulled her up with heartache and stroked the child's head. "It's been hard on our Jojo. Don't worry, I'll go talk to your father. We can't let people wrongly accuse you." The Empress was displeased and muttered softly, "You've been tormented like a day for several decades." Chapter 40:16. The little crown princess was led out by her husband with an inexplicable expression. Before leaving, she looked curiously at the old and young palace maids beside the Empress. They were all looking at her with a sympathetic gaze. What were they doing? The little crown princess didn't know that in the crown prince's explanation, these people had already imagined scenes of the little crown princess being bullied and humiliated. One of the old nannies even wiped away her tears with emotion. This was really a beautiful misunderstanding. In the great emperor's imperial study, Mo Luxing had a headache as he looked at the crying old lady sitting there. Princess Yen Yun awkwardly accompanied Empress Dowager Qin, not knowing how to comfort this heartbroken old lady. Since 2 hours ago, when she received the news that the old maids she sent to the Eastern Palace were all killed by the Crown Prince, the old lady almost fainted from anger. The old Empress Dowager, who ran to the great emperor to make a decision, cried 2 times in front of Mo Luxing with snot and tears, causing the great emperor to have a headache. When she thought of her son, she couldn't help but want to call him over to scold him. "Since you've messed with the old lady, then you should deter her until the end, okay? Look at what you're doing now." The old lady came to make a fuss in front of him. "The Empress has arrived. The Crown Prince and the Crown Princess have arrived." The 2 announcements made the unprepared Mo Luxing and Empress Dowager Qin's hearts skip a beat. Especially Empress Dowager Qin, her eyes narrowed. She had experienced the Empress's daughter-in-law in the past. That unruly temper, it might even be worse than the Crown Princess. Ever since she woke up, the old lady wanted to summon the Empress several times, but was stopped by the great emperor on the grounds that his wife had just recovered from a serious illness and couldn't go out to meet people. Now that they suddenly met in the imperial study, it was unexpected. Mo Luxing and the old lady were in two completely different moods. When he heard that his wife came with those two brats, he knew that those two brats definitely didn't have good intentions and went to ask his wife to come over to support them. It was hard to believe that those two brats could be so deceitful. Mo Luxing expressionlessly looked up at the three people who came in. His originally taut handsome face couldn't help but soften a bit when he saw his wife. She quickly walked out from behind the desk and greeted by Wuxia. She then turned to glare at Mo Lian grumpily as she reprimanded, "Your royal mother's body hasn't fully recovered yet. How can such a trivial matter alarm your royal mother? If I didn't come, who knows how my daughter-in-law would be bullied." The emperor was a bit dumbfounded and glanced at the little stoic suspiciously. What did these two brats say to their wife? Why did his wife look like she was protecting her empress with their arrogant and unreasonable temperaments? How could they be bullied by others? Was there a big misunderstanding? Wuxia. Mo Luxing pulled her small hand, chuckling as he smoothed things over. How could that be? Little glutinous dumpling's wife was not easy to deal with. His wife had been kept in the dark by these two brats and thought that they were good people. What was she supposed to do? Bai Wuxia brusquely pushed away the great emperor's hand and turned to look at the furious Empress Dowager Qin. I haven't seen the Empress Dowager in many years. Seeing you today, the Empress Dowager's graceful bearing is still the same. Empress Dowager Chen's lips twitched with a fake smile. Chapter 40:17. Bai Wuxia was helped to sit down by Mo Luxing. The Empress Dowager sat opposite her and watched. Seeing this scene, she pursed her lips. The great emperor was really considerate to this empress. He really doted on her for decades. She subconsciously raised her hand and patted Princess Yan Yun's small hand. Princess Yan Yun's expression was a little stiff. In the past, her status was already awkward enough with the princesses and infanta of the various small countries who were sent to the palace. But at least the empress had not woken up at that time. Even if they were awkward, they could live in the palace without any worries. It could be considered that they had asked for protection. But now the empress had woken up. She didn't know how she would live in the future. However, she, Yan Yun, wasn't the kind of person who wanted to interfere with the relationship between the great emperor and the empress. She wasn't like the other princesses, who wanted to be by the great emperor's side for years. Of course, those women who wanted to do something with the great emperor were all sent out of the palace without mercy. In the end, it was people like them who didn't want to improve, who barely survived in the depths of the palace. Although the days were rather hard, at least they were living in peace and stability, weren't they? In fact, the reason why they lived a stable life was definitely because they had been forgotten by the great emperor. She didn't want to interfere in today's matter. She didn't have the status or the ability to interfere. However, Empress Dowager Qin pulled her and cried. She had no choice but to be pulled into the imperial study by the Empress Dowager. It wasn't that she didn't know what the Empress Dowager was thinking. She was looking for all kinds of opportunities to matchmake her and the great emperor, but this also depended on the situation, didn't it? Mo Luxing was deeply in love with Bai Wuxia. That had been the same for decades. Could she, a small Yan Yun, change the situation? She wasn't so shameless to think that she was so capable. She, Yan Yun, knew very well what kind of position she had. Only smart people could live long. Princess Yan Yun sighed and stood up straight. She raised her head and stuck out her chest. With the bearing of a princess, she bowed to the great emperor and the empress. Although she was only the princess of a small country like Zhu Xi Nation, she represented the dignity of Zhu Xi Nation. Bai Wuxia's gaze fell on her face and looked her up and down. When he turned to the Empress Dowager, there was a hint of a smile in his eyes. I heard that the Empress Dowager has been very idle for more than 10 years. Mo Liuxing's heart jumped. Empress Dowager Qin also uncomfortably shifted her body. She tried to sit up straight and said with a dignified expression, "I don't know what the Empress means." The Empress smiled sweetly. For the past 10 years, the Empress Dowager has been thinking about taking a concubine for my husband all the time. Isn't it because she has nothing better to do? Empress Dowager Chen's face instantly turned red. Do you have nothing to do? This daughter-in-law of his was still as annoying as ever. It was better for her to be unconscious. She had lived a comfortable life for more than 10 years. The moment he woke up, he returned to this dead state. Just looking at him made one's teeth ache. This empress has been lying down for more than 10 years. Things have remained the same, but people have changed. Bai Wuxia took out a handkerchief and wiped the non-existent tears at the corner of his eyes. He said faintly, "Now, anyone can climb on top of this empress's head and behave atrociously." Mo Liuxing's eyelids kept twitching. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.